So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board. Our first agenda item is roll call. Secretary, can you take roll, please?
Chair Eileen Delaney,
Yes, here.
Vice Chair Miriam Pintar,
Here.
Secretary Bonnie Kank, I'm here. Dr. Lee Brown,
I'm here.
Andrew Hayes, Nadia Keen Ayub,
Present.
Ariana Federico Mondragon, Tim Ware, G.I. Wilson.
Present.
We have
We
a
have a
quorum.
quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Next agenda item is public comments. This is the opportunity of members of the public to speak to the board on any subject matter within our jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. And please fill out a speaker's form. Mr. Parker?
Thank you, Chair Delaney. We have at least 4 requests to speak in person and several online. First, we'll start with Thomas Lewis.
Thank you. I'm going to do the best I can here under very trying circumstances. Well, let me just start out with this. Good afternoon, racists, bigots, Nazis, pigs, parasite predators, psychopaths, maggots, child abusers, child endangerment willingly and knowingly, brainwashed, delusional idiots. This is what was allowed to attack us over the past several years. 8 years to be exact. A few years ago, we came here to get your guys' help. We didn't know, we're just innocent. We thought cops review board, we tell the truth, we'll provide the facts, and they won't allow these predators to continue on. We spoke with Lynn Seltzer here, and to the extent of our investigation, we provided her a lot of facts. We were going to provide her more. We could tell her, we told her we were going to provide her more. The only thing she did was she contacted the sheriff's department to promote a false narrative that the one they were promoting. And then she called us and asked us for our driver's license number. We told her that's on the form you provided us. On top of all that documentation, you're not going to review. And because she didn't review that information, what had no power was allowed to have power. When the airport manager told my wife to her face, "You have no rights and planes have no rules." Within that was July 8, 2015. The home we live in on several acres, we built in 1999 and never had an incident with the airport. It's several miles away on the other side of a mountain. So this is after we started having incidents, we went over there. Within 2 hours, she either came with her neighbor, Frank Junkman, in his airplane or by herself, and she aimed the plane at our front door 4 times within about 45 seconds. We were later able to identify that Frank Junkman was her neighbor in Escondido, and she had access to his plane. Because nobody would help us and the pigs were just lying continuously. They didn't want to work inside the scope of their job, and then they would come to our house and we would have paperwork to show them the FAA rules and regulations that these people were violating on purpose, and they would recite FAA rules and regulations to us that did not exist. A good one was from a guy named B. German that said planes could fly below 200 feet. This caused hundreds of attacks on top of her childcare, on top of a playground. Total loss of control of aircraft, just sliding it through the air, full roar, or turn the engine off and turn it back on so it'd be a loud bang. Just every unimaginable threat was perpetrated on us.
At treetop level.
It was at treetop level, and we couldn't stop it. I mean, the pigs wouldn't listen to us, and they kept lying to and about us, and that gave bad actors just more empathy, just
Mr.
more
Lewis.
go after us.
Mr. Lewis, your 3 minutes are up. However, I understand that Letitia Lewis would like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So we'll thank you, Mr.
What she wants to show you is when you don't do your job,
Mr. Lewis.
what happens, you didn't only harm us, you harm people in the community.
Okay, Mr. Lewis, your time is up. Thank you. And
Well, I'm just explaining to you, she's going to show you
Understood.
what you people destroyed
Understood.
willingly and knowingly. And I never stopped sending her
Mr.
emails,
Lewis.
and she didn't
Mr.
accept
Lewis.
any new information.
Okay, thank
Mr. Lewis,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
please.
you very much. Ms.
How'd I
Lewis,
do?
Ms. Lewis, your 3 minutes
Yes,
start now.
this is why you, but not doing your job, destroyed. And daycare was one of the best ever.
First accredited
first
in
accredited in
California,
California.
33 years.
Okay, it's her turn to speak.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And this was destroyed. This is what it was before. This is what it was later. My room,
After
my
this.
classroom is still to today empty. Because today, this morning, at 8 o'clock in the morning, we have
An emergency
one attack.
aircraft, simulated an emergency,
By
with
11
red light and
o'clock.
everything.
Ms.
We
Lewis, you
had three
carry on.
of them,
Okay.
okay? Here are my children. Every single kid. Every single kid. Look at that. Every single kid in this picture
I'd like you to stay back behind the podium, please.
have been
Excuse me,
damaged.
excuse me. You're gonna have to leave if you don't. Thank you.
Come, just wait here. We can do the job right.
We want to hear what you have to say, but you also have to follow.
Yeah, I didn't know you couldn't step on the other side.
Thank you.
I just wanted you to see what.
I understand that, but I asked you 3 times.
Okay, yes. This is the kids. My kids, I work from 5:30 in the morning to 5:30 in the afternoon, 5 days a week. Parents need me. My first kid, Mikey, right here, 4 weeks old, the first day he started my daycare. Why? Because the parents need me. Parents that work self-employed, they need my help. Some parents don't have the luxury to go and wait 6, 8, 12 weeks maternity. All paid for daycare, expensive daycare. My daycare, I have parents on Christmas. They come over, leave the kids with me on the weekend. So they can go buy the present. They have a surprise for the kids. This is what destroys by not doing their job. This is what the sheriff, it's not for you, but it's the one, Ramona Sheriff are the worst. We've been asking, begging,
Begging.
Tom,
Okay.
begging, please give us a report. We sent a letter all the way to the state capitol, to the general,
Attorney General.
Attorney General. They sent a letter back and said, we have to get a report from the sheriff,
Third party.
not, not one. FBI, we can do anything with a report. Why we can't get a report? Why?
Ms. Lewis, thank you very much. Your 3 minutes time is up.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Next, we will call David Settles.
Hello, good evening. I'm David Settles. Been up here a couple times. I'm here in memory and honor of my brother, Matthew Settles. My brother, my mom, I represent them too. They couldn't be here today, but, I just want to, once again, my brother passed away a year ago. He had schizophrenia. He was taken from the county mental hospital, was attacked in jail. We still have no information. We still, my whole family, would like to find out what Matthew went through, the entire time he was in jail. So I'm here to speak up for Matthew and just to say, I'm very glad to hear that the 2 SB 519 was passed and the other bill, I'm forgetting the number. I want to support Paul, the others of you who are willing to step up to support that early. I do support, the transparency of what's going on in jail, the improvements we need, whether it's for the mentally ill or preventing drugs from getting into the jail. Those are reforms that are needed. And thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you. Next, we will call Vicki Lewis. Ms. Lewis.
Hi, I'm here to represent my son, Jarrell Dwayne Lacey. April 11, he passed in jail And we thought it was because he had got jumped on by the officer in April the 3rd, which he was in the mental part. He was supposed to be in the part where the mental people were. And after they jumped on him, they put him in a regular unit. And I have a paper that he wrote to the medical clinic saying that he had blood clots in his leg and he needed to get treatment, and that he's on a top bunk. He don't need to be on the top bunk. And when they took him to the nurse to get checked, he was complaining that he had shortness of breath. He couldn't breathe, and his chest was hurting. And when they took him into the nurse, from my understanding, the nurse, they took him there at 11:36, and then they sent him back to his room at 11:49. And when the deputy decided to go check on him, it was around 12:01, and he was laying on his floor unresponsive. And I'm blaming the officer, the sheriff, and the nurse, because when they gave him the EKG, they didn't check it. And the nurse made a statement in another report that I got from my attorney that she was going upstairs and then she heard man down. Then she went down and realized it was my son. Then she decided to call 911 for him to get help. So they was the cause of my son dying. They had to put my son on blood thinner because he did complain January the 17th, 2022. He complained that he had blood clot and his legs was bothering him a lot. They did nothing about it. So I'm faulting the nurse and the deputy downtown sheriff department of his death.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. And just so the board knows, that's in reference to Mr. Lacy. Next, we will call Yusef Miller.
Good evening. My name is Yusef Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition, Saving Lives in Custody campaign. And first of all the family members who are with the Saving Lives in Custody campaign are elated about the passage of these two bills that are becoming law, AB 268 and SB 519, that we've been working on for years, especially the AB bill we've been working on for years, and the SB since it came out. We've been supporting it. We are so honored that Mr. Paul Parker supported that bill, went all the way up to the county to fight and speak up for that bill. With that being said, highly disappointed that this board itself, as a board, didn't support those laws, those bills that were coming into law. These were common sense bills. These are bills that could protect people's lives. And we asked you over and over to support, make an official statement to stand behind these, because the message sent to these families is that you don't support them when you don't support things that are common sense laws or bills that we're trying to make into law. We ask you in the future to please consider how these bills and actions affect family members and the community at large. We appreciate what you're doing so far, and we appreciate what you've done since the time we've started. This CLERB board has done basically a 180, and we appreciate all of you for doing that. But at the same time, we need you to work with us to make sure that we get these bills and passed, these legislations passed that will make improvements in these jails. We are far from done. These two steps of these two bills are only two steps of many steps we need to take in custody deaths. We still have to deal with mental health issues, as you just heard from Ms. Lacy. If the person is put in a situation where we know from the medical standpoint that they are going to possibly act out and then get in trauma and in trouble in jail and then suffer the consequences, it is our fault we put them in that position. It is our fault that we didn't put them where they're supposed to go. So when we try to sidestep, we can't sidestep these issues, because these issues are all of our fault. You are the Civilian Law Enforcement Review Board for the Sheriff's Department and all complaints. And these complaints come in regularly. I receive regular complaints that people are not getting their medications, seizure medications, heart medications, all kinds of. I went to visit another person last week, and he was in there for maybe 6 months. He just got his mental health medicine just now. This could have been terrible. He could have had an interaction with a person in there and lost his life. We're asking you to pay more attention, to be along with us and support us as we move forward. We're still going to be here because the work is not done. And like I said, we appreciate everything you've done thus far, but let's stick to it and let's double time it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We do not have any additional in-person speakers, but we do have some online. We'll start with Karen Remus.
Hello, Mr. Parker. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good evening, CLERB members. My name is Karen Remus, and I'm a 25-year resident of zip code 92131, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. On October 5th, in a story titled, "As People Keep Dying in San Diego Jails, Newsom Signs Local Lawmakers' Oversight Bill into Law," the Union Tribune reported that Governor Newsom signed into law both Senate Bill 519 and Assembly Bill 268. The bills expand oversight of California jails and were authored by local lawmakers after continuing deaths in San Diego County jails. Amongst its provisions, SB 519 provides that sheriff's records related to internal jail death investigations will be subject to public disclosure. As CLERB members know, these reports are written by the Sheriff's Critical Incident Review Board. In the UT story, State Senator Tony Atkins, who authored SB 19, said, quote, "The bottom line behind SB 519 is simple. We have to do everything we can to ensure that people do not continue to die in our local jails and detention facilities. That was the intent behind this bill and the actions it will take to improve transparency, oversight, and accountability will help ensure that intent becomes reality," end quote. CLERB, with SB 519 now signed into law, I ask you to both call for and monitor timely and full implementation of SB 519 within the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. Your collective voice carries great weight. Please use it. Thank you for your service to our county and for the opportunity to address you this evening.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Leslie Crawford. Ms. Crawford?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to thank you, Mr. Parker, because SB 519 was very important to me. And I know the Sheriff's Department was aware because the CIRB started to appear on their website about a month ago. And it's really important. I think we have systemic problems in the Sheriff's Department and health officials. They observe, but they no longer act. They have become immune to human compassion. And I have one question before I leave. I was reading in your report, you requested 12 hours before and 12 hours after video retention. My question is, if there's been a death occurred, will they retain if they did it? If they had it at all, would they have to retain that if there was a death? Or is it just automatically deleted? I'll leave you now, and thank you for the time speaking, and please keep doing what you're doing, Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Next, we'll go to Dr. Fishman. Dr. Fishman?
Thank you. Good evening. Darwin Fishman, he, him, his, Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego. And I appreciate what's been shared, especially about the legislation that has passed. But I just want to support not just with the legislation, but also, of course, what's taking place on a day-to-day basis. And I think the cultural part about how the jails operate, all of you are very aware of that, but I can't highlight and emphasize that. With this recent article by Jeff McDonald in the UT, Nurse Alarm Before Inmate Died, all of the issues that are highlighted in here, we've been literally coming to CLERB with these issues for years. And it's clear that even with this legislation passing, this can still slide by. Call box not working, not a quick enough response time, 45 minutes, not enough care to what's taking place with the people that are in the jails. And really, it's a training, it's how you prepare people that are there, and clearly not as enough is being done. If you read this article, what's heart-wrenching is it feels like people are being placed in this torture chamber where their lives do not matter. basic human decency is completely lost. And you get this testimony meeting after meeting from impacted families that have gone through this. The issue is not whether or not we're at 12 deaths this year and it's lower or higher than last year, the record 20. It's how people are dying and whether or not these are substantial things that could be changed, not just through policy and waiting for politicians to pass legislation, but also for CLERB in terms of raising the bar in what you expect for policy and the sheriffs following it. How can you engage with them to do better so that we don't have to keep having these people die in custody? Hopefully, with the continued push of us coming to this meeting and raising these issues, you will continue to take that and to also continue to push the sheriff's department, as again, they're here on the agenda with not just your policy recommendations, but how you interact with them and the message you send to them about what should be done, the proper care and operations of the jails. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Jennifer Schmidt. Ms. Schmidt, are you there? Gilbert Gill's daughter.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm here with my twin sister, Lindsay Biondo. It's been 20 months and 3 days, and in a matter of 19 minutes, it'll be for the 3 days. He didn't have to die. We called for an ambulance, and he was illegally arrested. Told my family he's going to the hospital. Took him to jail where he got 5 units of insulin, and not for 15 hours was he checked on. 15 hours when they found him with rigor mortis setting in. He was cold and blue, but they gave him 20 doses of Narcan, but only 5 units of insulin. I'm tired of hearing because we're short-staffed or somebody called in. That's not an excuse for me not to have my dad anymore. That's not an excuse for Sunday Weddle not to have Saxon Rodriguez anymore. It's not an excuse for the Paloma Cerna and her family not to have Alyssa anymore. It's not fair to anybody. Sean Mills, Mr. Mills will never know what happened to his son, and for what? Because there's a statute of limitation of when you can find out. Okay, now that these bills have passed, when do we really get to see the action of it? When do we really get to get the reports of what happened to our loved ones? Or is this just another level that we're not going to be able to get through? Thank you, Paul, for going to Sacramento. I appreciate it. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Dave. Dave, are you there?
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I filed a complaint because of shootings in our neighborhood. The response I've received from this review board reminds me of listening to the mayor of New York, the governor of New York, the mayor of Chicago, now complaining that they're getting, or even Martha's Vineyard, they got 50 illegals, compared to what I know my son, who lives down in Texas, deals with on a daily basis. It's a denial of reality. When I filed this complaint, I was asking for the reason and the understanding as to why I cannot get a sheriff's report on someone who stalked me and harassed me in the street. I cannot get his name. I cannot file a restraining order. These are crack dealers across the street. I also filed in this complaint that there was a shooting in March of this year. A gangbanger came up right across from the street and shot 3 of the losers there. Now, you answered, or whoever prepared this, and said not sustained. No information. I cannot get a police report. Why is that? Why can I not get a police report? If I Google and just do a search for shootings in Casadero, they're all over the place. The helicopter was above my house yesterday for 5 hours. Every single complaint I made, you as a board or whoever it was wrote not sustained, summary dismissed, not sustained. When I asked for the facts, you didn't provide any counterfacts. There's been, are the police not reporting this? We've had 4 shootings, 2 dead bodies in the last year. And you're telling me that it's not sustained? I'm having trouble understanding why I even filed a complaint, because it appears that either the police are not reporting these, or for some reason, I, as a citizen, I can't even get a copy of the report for the name for a man who stalked me. I'm a senior citizen, and yet there's been no response. I would like to know why we cannot get copies of police reports, or why I get stonewalled every time I go to the sheriff's office, or why I get given the same excuse that they can't do anything. It's absurd. And I would ask all the members of this review board, have you had any shootings in your neighborhood? Have you had the helicopter circling around your house for 5 hours?
Thank you. And for the board, that was David Swim in reference to case 23084. Next, we will go to Paloma Serna.
Hello, thank you, board member, for letting me speak today. First of all, my name is Paloma Serna. I'm the mother of Elisa Serna, who died November 11th of 2019. I want to thank you, Paul Parker, for speaking on our behalf and backing us up on SB 519 and AB 268. I appreciate North County Equity and Justice Center Coalition. I'd like to thank Yusuf. I'd like to thank every impacted family as we stand together and we rally and we lifted our voice and fought for these bills to be passed so we could finally get the answers that we need with the CLERB's report, in which my family were able to receive, and also we were able to receive the internal affair investigation. And I could see why the sheriff department of San Diego refused and fight with us to not get these reports. I am appalled. I'm disgusted. I have difficulty of trying to grasp how could these people let our loved ones die in a condition, in the way they leave them, how they've been neglected. I could hardly wait for us to have our day in court, so the society, so the residents of San Diego County can see how our loved ones are treated, because they are drug addicts, because they are crackheads, because they are the black sheep of society. They are still someone's loved one. They are still someone's daughter, brother, mother, father, sister. They are my child. So I invite Paul Parker and every CLERB member to please come out in January 17th for the criminal case, and also for the civil case that we have in February 20th. We need it, like Yusuf Miller had stated earlier, the fight is not done. These are 2 steps to the direction that we want to head for. We need to continue to fight to get rid of the statute of limitation. Here, Jarrell Lacey, a year later, the CLERB is revealing this information of his death. Why have not San Diego sheriff revealed this information to the public? We need the CLERB to continue to be its own entity and pull away and have not only recommend things to the county sheriff, but to make them, force them to change. Thank you for your time and for giving me a chance to speak to you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Robin Sales. Ms. Sales?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thanks for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm a member of the Behavioral Health Advisory Board from District 3 and co-chair of the Criminal Justice Subcommittee. Our subcommittee looks at the intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health. And so we are doing our investigations not at the level that the CLERB does, but try to understand and affect policy change from within behavioral health services. I continue to marvel at the disregard for life in the San Diego County jails. In the case of Gerald Wayne Lacey, investigated by CLERB and to be reported on tonight, the UT indicates that he was an incarcerated person with severe mental illness. He had been conserved, he had been on 5150s, and still they did not have him on the appropriate unit. Again, we find ourselves wondering what could have been done to save his life. If a person with that level of dysfunction is to survive in jail, there is a 6th-floor unit specifically for men where they are closely monitored and where staff has been specifically and more thoroughly trained in de-escalation tactics. Beating up somebody who has severe mental illness is cruel and unusual punishment. 3 issues come to the forefront in reading about this tragedy. One is that he was improperly placed and monitored. Secondly, that most deputies don't have sufficient in vivo behavioral health training, which could be offered through PERT. And last, that the antiquated video system is not being replaced quickly enough. And what happened to body-worn cameras? When I read your report, I see not sustained, not enough information. But why is it that the Sheriff's Department is allowed to stonewall the CLERB? All of these can and should be completed immediately. You cannot do your job if hamstrung by the Sheriff's Department policies. And I stand with the families and other activists in their quest for justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Pat Warner. Pat Warner?
Here I am. Thank you. My name is Pat, and I'm a 30-plus year resident of San Diego County. First, I'd like to acknowledge the CLERB members and staff for your commitment to justice and to thank you for the work that you do in pursuit of that goal. I'm especially appreciative of your efforts to include non-sworn jail personnel under your purview, and I hope you will have success with that issue. The COVID-19 pandemic brought to light the many inadequacies in providing basic health measures to jails and the incarcerated individuals held there, and it seems that that continues to this day. The October 8th Union Tribune article by Jeff McDonald detailed complaints of overflowing toilets, lack of protective items for dealing with that situation, and repeated exposure to bird defecation. For me, this is an issue about basic human rights. I think we can all agree that none of us would want to be subjected to conditions like these as part of our daily lives. So why would we subject others to these situations unless it is for punishment? Many incarcerated individuals have not even been convicted of a crime, yet they are subject to conditions which are not appropriate to providing secure and healthy lives, which everyone certainly deserves. Is it only the influential and wealthy members of our society who are entitled to be presumed innocent until proven guilty? Growing up, I was taught that the purpose of our justice system was to prevent crime by rehabilitating individuals and encouraging them towards alternate pathways to the ones they were headed down. This sentiment seems to have disappeared over the years, with treatment of incarcerated people as less than human. It is said that we reap what we sow. If incarcerated people are seldom provided reasonable living conditions or treated with respect, how can we expect to improve the outcomes from our system? If the system treats these people more like animals than humans, it is logical that there will be negative outcomes both for individuals and for society at large. I understand that the CLERB has opened investigations into the charges mentioned in this recent article.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Ms. Warner, your time is up. Next, we will go to Lynn Owens. Lynn Owens.
This is Lynn Owens. I've lived for 45 years in San Diego County, and I've been following and observing CLERB for something over a year now. I have to tell you, as an ordinary citizen watching you guys work with what you have to deal with month after month, I thank you from the depth of my heart for your patience and dogged persistence in pushing towards greater humanity within SDPD and our county jails and prisons. You have a really tough job to do, and I know that you're restrained in many different ways from doing what we would all like to see you do. I really appreciate you continuing to push forward as best you can. Your tasked breadth and depth are daunting at best, but I thank you and admonish you to please continue monitoring SDSD's implementation and compliance, in part by requiring regular progress reports from the sheriff's office on all the proposed, recommended, and legislatively approved changes. Occasional wins like SB 519 and AB 268 perhaps can help, but only if they're followed by timely and effective implementation from SDPD, which means we need you to monitor progress here as well as everywhere else, which means even more work for all of you to do. But it's fundamental work and it needs to be done. So again, thank you and carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no additional requests to speak in person, I believe, and we have no additional requests to speak online. However, I have two comments to be read into the record. The first will be from Tom Packard. I want to touch on two subjects. First, since Chair Delaney reported in January that she has invited the sheriff to attend CLERB meetings, and there has been no action on this, I want to mention this again with hopes that you will invite her and she will attend. We in the community have questions that only she can answer, and I hope that your board does as well regarding subjects including her personal priorities for the jail and how she thinks things are going. Second, given the increased attention that the sheriff's department and the community are giving to behavioral health services in the jail and the staffing challenges that they continue to have, it would be useful if the sheriff's staff include at every meeting data on behavioral health services and staffing for the previous month, including current staff coverage at all hours in all jails, specific plans for recruiting and onboarding new staff, any challenges they are addressing, and numbers and types of behavioral health services which were provided by county and contract staff. Thank you for your attention. The next and final e-comment under public comment is from Deidre McLeod. I appreciate that tonight we will hear another presentation from the Sheriff's Department. It's important that CLERB and the public are informed directly about their programs and procedures so we all better understand how the department works. However, over the last 2 years, CLERB has heard 11 agenda listed presentations from the Sheriff's Department or related county staff, not counting presentations by Executive Officer Parker, but only one community group has been invited to speak before you, the San Diegans for Justice. Again, I would like to ask you to consider rounding out the input you received during these meetings with formal presentations from community organizations with expertise and experience in law enforcement oversight and accountability. Giving such groups the opportunity to share information here before you and the public will center voices typically left out of the conversation and go a long way toward building trust with the San Diego communities you represent. Thank you. And to be clear, the presentation tonight is from the probation department, not the sheriff's department. And that concludes our e-comments.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your comments. And now we have the minutes approval from the August meeting. Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Secretary could take roll call, please.
Who made the motion? I'm sorry. And who seconded it?
Gary, GI, and we have a second with
Thank you.
Ms. Pintar.
Thank you.
Chair Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miriam Pintar,
Yes.
Secretary Bonnie Kank, yes. Dr. Arlie Brown,
Yes.
Andrew Hayes,
Yes.
Nadia King Ayub,
Yes.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Our next agenda item is a presentation of the overall of, excuse me, overview of the juvenile justice realignment activities. Probation Department Division Chief Matthew Strickland. Hello, Mr. Strickland. How are you?
Hello, thank you for having me, Matt Strickland, Division Chief, East Mesa Juvenile Detention Facility, San Diego Probation Department. I'm here, as indicated, to talk about SB 823 DJJ realignment and the local secure youth treatment facility, which is known as the Youth Development Academy. The purpose and intent of, and please advance the slide. The purpose and intent of SB 823, Senate Bill 823, was to close the Division of Juvenile Justice, which was part of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. SB 823 shifted responsibility for all youth adjudicated wards of the court in a juvenile setting to the local counties. And you may please advance 2 slides. The principles behind SB 823 were that justice-involved youth are better served closer to home, where they can be better connected to their families and to their communities. Also to leverage the historic success of juvenile probation and to reduce the transfer of young people into the adult criminal justice system. Dispositions, it is understood, should be the least restrictive that's appropriate to reduce the use of confinement through community-based response and interventions. Sorry, the least restrictive alternative that's possible to achieve the desired result of rehabilitation. There are 2 levels to SB 823. The state level, which is the creation of the Office of Youth and Community Restoration. The Office of Youth and Community Restoration is a new entity within the California Health and Human Services that has an ombudsman with investigative powers. They are developing units to research and promulgate best practices and data collection techniques to us, as well as provide technical advice to the counties. They will also provide oversight of the SB 823 grant programs from the state. And then at the county level, there's the requirement to create a local secure youth treatment facility. Our local secure youth treatment facility is known as the Youth Development Academy. Additionally, local jurisdiction was shifted to the age of 23 and 25 for juveniles. And local confinement can continue up to the age 25. So that's up to the 24 years and 364 days, essentially. So the age extension, SB 823 extended the age of local juvenile court jurisdiction for youth adjudicated for 707B offenses, which is serious offenses, to the age of 23. If that offense was also something that would have carried an adult sentence of 7 years or more, then the age can be extended to 25. So what that means from a practical perspective is that we'll have youths in our facility, what we'd call like a transitional age youth in our facility, who may be with us up until they're 24 years and 364 days, potentially. And then our local impact, we had 32 youths who returned to us from the Division of Juvenile Justice into local custody. The average age of them, as on the slide, was 19 years and 3 months. They have an average of 3 to 4 years remaining on their commitment with us. There's a list here of the typical charges, along with some numbers of how many returned with those charges. As you can see, this is kind of the deep end of the juvenile justice system. We've also, since the opening of the program, had 26 additional youths committed directly to the program. So these are youths who are committed to Youth Development Academy in lieu of being committed to DJJ because that option no longer exists. So we have 51 currently in custody. That includes 1 one female and 50 males housed separately. This program creates, a staffing requirement of about 15 staff in each unit that we open for it. Right now, we have 3 units open for the program. We expect to have a 4th unit open sometime within the next month or so. We anticipate that we'll grow to a total of 6 units, and the overall plan for each of those units is to house 12 youths within it. But one of the local impacts is that it's increased our per unit population in our typical juvenile hall units fairly substantially because of the additional space within the facility that it's taking up. So the Youth Development Academy itself, it's our local secure youth treatment facility to meet the needs of SB 823. The program structure is designed to support principles of trauma-informed and culturally responsive care and a developmental approach to youth rehabilitation. The commitments to the program can range from as little as 18 months to as long as 7 years. I'll just mention that you're starting to see some photos of the setting, and that reflects a project that we undertook and are still ongoing to remodel the units for this population. So the eligibility requirements for YDA is youths between 14 and 24 years old who've been adjudicated for a 707B offense. Those are offenses such as murder, voluntary manslaughter, robbery, sexual offenses, kidnapping, rape, assault with a deadly weapon other than firearm if there's great bodily injury. So this is designed for the youths who have committed the most serious offenses. We can advance one more, please. So our softening remodel, as I mentioned, we refer to it as the softening project because East Mesa Juvenile Detention Facility, where this program is located, was built as a juvenile hall, intended to operate as a juvenile hall, providing short-term detention for fairly large numbers of youth. Each unit was originally designed to hold 45 youths, but before that facility opened in 2004, it was revised down to 30 per unit, which is the maximum capacity that it's operated under since 2004 when it opened. Because of the longer commitment times for these individuals in this program, we don't think that 30 people per unit would be an ideal setting for them. So to create a more ideal setting for them, we've been softening the overall look of the setting to make it more home-like, and also reducing the number of youths that will be housed within each unit. Currently, we're running about 15 in these units, 15 to 18 in these units. But once all of the units are completed, we're looking to run them as 12-bed units, which is a best practice model. It really exceeds best practices. So our YDA services are through a combination of sources. Primarily, we have a contract with SBCS to provide services for this population, and they provide the bulk of the services. We also have a few volunteer programs, and we also have a memorandum with our behavioral health services within the county to provide services to this population. You can see here a list of some of the programs that are available to them right now. I think one of them has ETA on it on there. I haven't removed that. That's being delivered currently. You can see the types of programs that we're delivering to them are of a cognitive behavioral nature, which is thinking about how thoughts precede actions and how to replace thoughts to get better results from your actions. We've also partnered with Southwestern College. The San Diego County Office of Education has been providing services as well for those youths who are still high school students, as well as some supportive services for youths who are college students. Southwestern has been a good partner to us for their college needs. Southwestern has a justice-involved program, and they have, in addition to online education, they also have a professor who's been coming out and doing one of the classes in person at the facility. Again, you're getting a look there in the corner of some of the softening project. Just to speak a little bit about the types of things that we're doing in that remodel. We've replaced the flooring to have a more home-like look to the flooring. Those murals have been installed to give a little bit more of a window view feeling for the youth. Interiors of the youth rooms, you might have seen in one of the slides before, interiors of the youth rooms have been remodeled. The facility started its life with concrete bunks, and we've removed the concrete bunks and replaced them with like a molded product that's a little more comfortable and better for the youth, as well as completely repainting, interior remodel. And then the plumbing fixtures in the youth rooms have been replaced with a white powder coat fixture. So it has more of like a porcelain appearance like you'd have at home. The classrooms are completely redone. The lighting has been replaced in these units, and all of the furniture is new. So we're doing this to 6 units right now, which will give us, through our ideal model of 12 youths per unit, a capacity of about 72 in the remodeled units. And that's in line with the number of youths that the County of San Diego has typically had at the Division of Juvenile Justice when it was open. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the public? And I'd like to just remind you, these are comments, not questions. If not, okay. Board members, any questions? Okay. Connie? Sorry, Bonnie.
You said that you currently have 51 youths in this program, 50 males and 1 female.
Yes.
Are they all housed together?
They're currently housed well, the female is currently housed at the Youth Transition Campus, which is a separate facility.
Okay.
That's where our girls' commitment program is. And because there's only one of them, it seemed most prudent to house her where the other girls' commitment program is right now. The 50 boys are housed at the East Mesa facility, and they're spread between 3 units right now. And in the future, quite soon, we plan to open a 4th unit.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are they separated by age?
They're separated by their, so as a general practice, we look at age, size, and sophistication in the way that we house people. In this program, another thing that we look at is their phase within the program. So as they phase up within the program, they graduate from one setting to another. And as they graduate to a different unit, a different setting, they find different privileges in those units. So it gives them something to work towards. So that's the primary way that they're separated right now.
Okay. You said generally, how many how many people do we have in there over 21 years of age that are currently housed in that system?
I couldn't answer the question with specificity, but we have several youths who are in the facility. We have several youths who are 20 years old or older. But
can you give me an estimate?
I'm reluctant to give you an incorrect estimate, but I would guess that it's like less than 10.
Maybe you could get back to us.
That would probably be more prudent.
Yeah,
Sure.
not a problem.
Sure. Okay.
Marianne?
Thank you. You actually, I toured both the juvenile detention facilities a few months ago. Thank you for your staff's time. Just to follow up on Ms. Kina Youb's question, I think what she's getting at is, do we have 14-year-olds and 24-year-olds housed in the same unit? And correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is that they may be housed in the same unit, but they are not, they have individual rooms, right? The only time they are interacting is when there's like a common time in a common room, or
yes,
I should let you answer the question. But
sure. So yeah, we don't have 24-year-olds and 14-year-olds together in the same unit right now. In this program, because it's the deep end of the juvenile justice system, it trends towards older individuals. Like I believe I touched on the average age of those returning from DJJ was 19 years and 3 months. So we don't have a lot of younger individuals in this program. I don't know if I answered your whole question.
I think you answered the question. Is that kind of what you were trying to? I don't recall seeing any youth at the lower end of the range interacting with the older
yes, and
IPs, but they do interact though, like in the common eating area, there's common activity areas, but that's all supervised, correct?
Right. So youths who are, so speaking specifically about Youth Development Academy, this program, we don't have a lot of younger individuals in it. Everyone in the entire facility, inside and outside of this program, has an individual sleeping room. No one sleeps in a room with anyone else, and there's no dormitory style sleeping in the facility. And so people do come out and interact with people during their, community time or in the classrooms or recreation and things like that. For the general population in the detention facility, not in Youth Development Academy, age, size, sophistication, and other factors like some people are kept separate from one another due to gang affiliation issues or co-participants in the same offense and things of that, or even victim in an offense and things of that nature. So all of that is taken into account as to how we house the other individuals in the detention population.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm wondering if we can get a copy of the presentation, if we can add it to like the board links, because I don't have a copy of the presentation. You went through it kind of fast.
Okay.
So I'm trying to follow along. How long have you had the Youth Development Academy?
The Youth Development Academy opened in 2022, and I'm blanking on the exact date, but I want to say it was like in the summer of 2022.
So like a year,
It's been,
right?
yeah, it's been about a year.
Could you share more of like your department's goals and like what are you trying to meet within like the next year, like within the next 5 years? Like how are you all working together? I think essentially most of us would want to see young people out of like the system, back with their families, with their communities. But I'm trying to understand like, what the department is looking at. I know that the probation is working with the Vera Institute, which I think is really great for starting policy on ending girls' incarceration. So I'd just like to hear a little bit more about what you see and what you are doing proactively right now.
Sure. So for Youth Development Academy, the biggest next steps for us are career technical education. So SBCS is bringing on board career technical education for initially for culinary arts and for horticulture, but we'll be growing from there. And then also we have a partnership with County Fire to start a fire science program. And we'll have youths, and they're very excited and interested in this. And we're very happy because County Fire, which partners with CAL FIRE, has come out and spoken to the youths about that program. And they also have an individual, a ranking individual in CAL FIRE who has some lived experience from earlier in their life, who's willing to come out and talk to them. So we're very excited about that in terms of next steps. That's kind of where we see the program growing, and going from career technical education into providing them with more in the facility work opportunities, and then using that as a bridge to work opportunities in the community to help them have successful reentry. Yes.
So does that mean that they will continue to have those opportunities after they complete the program? And if you can also share like any other like support services for like housing. We know like housing is a really big issue that is really, I think, is driving a lot of like the unhoused situation. So I was just wondering like how you support them like during the program and planning for the releasing, but the integration back to communities.
Sure. So we have a really great reentry team. We have several reentry officers who start working with youths immediately, and a strong component of the program is geared towards reentry. Actually, they have at least monthly a meeting with their multidisciplinary team, which includes their reentry officer. And that is focused not just on what's happening right now, but also on getting them to where they need to be release ready. we're having a lot of talks about the importance of, housing. The department has resources. This is an interesting area for us because of their transitional age. They are with us in the juvenile side of the department, but we're in discussions about how to best leverage the resources that the adult side of the department has for them when they enter the community to make sure that they have, adequate housing.
Mark,
Yes.
question. If that's okay. So I went to a conversation that had to do like with transportation, like what do folks want to see? And there's actually a mother who has a youth in East Mesa, and shared a little bit about like how it's difficult for her to go see her child. Wondering if you work with families that provide any services to go do the visitation. I think we are in really hard times, and sometimes like transportation doesn't really gets us there, or it's really long. And I'm pretty sure that's the same situation with a lot of folks who are incarcerated in other places. Do you provide any resources that I could share back?
So if the youth is in the Youth Development Academy program, we have the partner in SBCS that can help with that. If the youth is not in the Youth Development Academy program, we're in the process of looking for similar services for the general detention population. But in the meantime, we offer, and I know that it's not a perfect substitute, but we offer free video visitation as an option. And then you can point people to speak to us at the facility, and we can try to come up with the probation officer with like one-off plans for people and things like that as well. But those are the sort of general resources that are available right now.
Over several decades, we've seen a decrease with the juvenile population involvement in the criminal justice system. But in the last year, the media is reporting spikes in the juvenile justice system when it comes to crimes against people, violent crimes against people. Have you seen this trend? And if you're seeing this trend, are you prepared to deal with a spike in the juvenile justice system involving serious crimes against people, to include murder, so on and so forth?
So yes, we are seeing the effects of that in our population. Thankfully, our population has not returned to pre-COVID numbers, but it has seen a significant uptick, particularly in the last 12 months. The main thing that's going to help us be prepared for that is the opening of phase 2 of the youth transition campus in the Kearney Mesa area, where the old Kearney Mesa Juvenile Hall was. There's a side of that facility that has yet to open that will bring on 72 beds in a very nice 12-bed cottage setting. I don't know if the board has had an opportunity to see the youth transition campus before, but it's really state of the art. So we'll be bringing online an additional 72 beds there. That will take a large chunk of our general population, the juvenile hall population, out of East Mesa and up into that setting. And that'll help us in that regard, although I hope that we don't need the additional capacity. And I guess I should add, I'm sorry. I guess I should add that you brought that up, and it reminded me about the Youth Transition Campus Phase 2, which is opening in early 2024. And that's also kind of responsive to your question about what can be done about the transportation issues, as we do plan in the future to get back to having more of our population at the central location, which should help with that.
So it's a really difficult topic for me to wrap my head around. Children incarcerated, just a difficult idea. I watched the slides, but I just want to narrow down on one thing. What are you doing for mental health services? These are children, they're children. They're 14, even up to 24. They're kids. What are you doing to help them work through whatever trauma caused them to react this way? And is that going to be ongoing? And are they able to speak with people if they're being re-traumatized in these spaces, 14-year-olds with 24-year-olds, I can't imagine that that always works well.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. We have a partnership with our behavioral health services from the county's Health and Human Services. And they, through that arrangement, they have a clinician for these units, and they provide, care. Every youth who's in our custody has a clinician assigned to them. And so, based on their level of need, they're seen by their clinician, either potentially very frequently. And then also some of the services that were, and I apologize because I'm hearing that I went through the slides very fast, but in the slide, and I will provide the slides for you. The slide with the list of all the services, a number of those things are related to cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral training. And those are intended to address some of that. Also, some of the groups are restorative in nature, and that's intended to work on some of the trauma that some of them have experienced.
Sort of follow up to that, dealing with individuals who are violent, whether adults or juveniles, take special skills and a specialized training. Are you prepared? And do you have the resources to provide both the psychological, psychiatric, and sociological or social workers that are equipped to work with individuals who are violent?
Yeah, that's a great question. Over the last few years, our department has been transitioning to a different model of physical intervention for violent situations. And I would say that that's a work that continues to be in progress. We've partnered with something that's called the MANT system, which is de-escalation strategies and then physical intervention strategies that are specifically designed for use in youth settings. So we've rolled out a significant amount of training on that, and I think there's more to come with that.
And do you have any involvement with juveniles who are going to be tried as adults? If they're 17, do you house them, or they go to an adult facility if they're to be tried as an adult?
Yeah, typically those cases are very complicated, and they may potentially spend a long time with us while the courts are working out whether it's most appropriate to try them on the adult side or the juvenile side. So yes, we typically have them for a long time. Yes.
I have a question that I'm sure, like, I don't have like all the facts, but I do know that there's an advocacy group called Youth Will that was doing some advocacy to take away using pepper sprays like on youth. Do you use that? Do you have a policy that still allows you? Because I'm assuming that it has to do with how officers like may or may not deal with violent situations. If you could share a little bit more, and if the new policy or the new trainings that you're looking into, if it moves away from those types of practices that are harmful and traumatic.
So our officers do continue to carry OC spray. The MANT training is designed to focus on de-escalation and to reduce the use of OC spray and other forms of physical intervention unless absolutely necessary.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And if you could get back with the slides to you have them. Okay, great. Thank you. The next agenda item is Executive Officers Report. But before Paul starts speaking, first of all, I want to thank the staff here. You guys have been tremendous during Paul's absence. And for those of you, I don't want to share too much, but Paul had he had emergency surgery. It was a long recovery. He's doing great. Well, as great as Paul can do. And I want to thank everyone, staff in particular, for carrying on. I'm sorry that we had to cancel our meeting last month. It was not because of our staff. It was actually because of our board. We had issues with the quorum. So welcome back. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate staff.
And I was going to thank all of you and staff as well. It's obvious I'm not needed. So, I mean, you guys did just fine without me for 6
And
weeks.
there's
So it is
Paul.
what it is, right? So with that, thank you. Seriously, thank you all. And thank you for reaching out. And for those of you that helped me get back to where I am today, I appreciate it. So we'll start with just some basic updates on our staffing. At this point, our administrative secretary 3, we've had an opening for about 4 or 5 months. Interviews were conducted last week, and we'll hopefully be able to give you an update. We definitely will be able to give you an update in the November meeting as to where we stand with that. And the same thing for our special investigator opening. We have at this time, one special investigator opening, and that we'll be able to give you an update in November as far as that, but we're actively doing everything we can to fill those positions. Also, there is a deputy chief position, the number 2 person to me to act in my absence. That position has been granted to us during the course of the budgetary process this last year because we are growing and we are becoming, I think it's pretty fair to say, extremely relevant in the community, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I'll give you an update on that in November. But I wanted to let you know that those 3 things are occurring. And it's not anything, just so you know, I know this board wants to know about our staffing, and they also want to know about our 5-year planning on our budgeting. So I'm going to give you a little bit of update about that, just as far as the staffing goes. One of the things that we have presented in the course of trying to prepare for 5-year, the plan, are several additional positions, but a lot of it's dependent upon jurisdictional expansion and whatnot, which we'll talk about later, of course. But what we have, at least very tentatively, and this doesn't mean anything, it just simply means that we're beginning the process of looking at our staffing. So we have asked to be considered for 2 additional special investigators, specifically if the jurisdiction expands to medical and mental health care. We've asked for an analyst. We've asked for a probation-specific investigator based on some of the things we heard today and some of the things we're going to talk about here in a little bit. We think that we've seen an increase in our cases, case complaints, or cases being brought to our attention about probation. So we've asked for that. We've asked for a senior investigator, or at least we're looking. None of this is official. This is what we're looking at. This is what we're asking to be considered for the next budgetary cycle. A communications outreach person, a community outreach person. That's one of the things we definitely need. A lot of people don't know about us. And unfortunately, the people who know about us because someone died or because they're in jail. And we think that we just haven't had the staffing to get out into the community. So we're asking for that as well. And finally, for the next fiscal year, we're looking at perhaps an office assistant to assist with the administrative functions within the department if the growth is if that actually happens. So that's for you specifically, Chair Delaney. I know you're concerned about wanting to know the staffing in our planning. So that was for you. Okay.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Not a problem. I do want to point out, if you look at, well, let's talk about a couple other things real quickly. Over the last couple of months, prior to my absence, we met with, I think I briefed it during the August meeting, but we met with we met with the Sheriff's Department about a couple of items, and we're going to talk about those items specifically in 7A and then 8A. So I'll give you the update on those. But we also met with the Probation Department on August the 10th, and we talked about a couple of issues. Some of those issues will be brought up in 7B tonight. But some of the other issues that we brought up were, we found that the Sheriff's Department, a couple of years ago, December of 2020, our jurisdiction expanded after George Floyd's murder to include the reporting of great bodily injury as a result of use of force by peace officers. Well, since that time, the Sheriff's Department, now granted they have patrol and they have the 7 detention facilities, they've reported well over 30 or 40 of these instances. These are also to be reported to the state. There is a mandate that you report it to the state as well, and they've done so. We've not received any from the Probation Department. So that, on the surface, seems to be a very good thing. But we looked and we noticed, and we had this conversation with the sheriff, with the Probation Department. They filed none with the state and none with us. So we thought, well, that's interesting, right? Because the definition of serious bodily injury is kind of, the Sheriff's Department has what the law says, and I believe the probation department does as well. But there seems to maybe be a little bit of confusion, and maybe there's an interpretation, not confusion, but an interpretation that they're going to be looking at. So we don't have that interpretation yet as to what is actually serious bodily injury. When it comes to probation, if I'm speaking wrong, they'll let me know. But for example, we have a case right now, and I can't get into it, it's an active case, but the sheriff's department reported it. It's because someone chipped a tooth. Use of force resulting in great bodily injury. The chipping of the tooth, the sheriff's department reported it and reported it to the state. We don't know if that would happen, if it happened in probation, to be clear. So we've talked to them about that. We're waiting to get word back about their definition for that serious bodily injury and to see if, once that's defined internally, if that will result in the back reporting of several cases that might have met that jurisdiction. Also, I know we've mentioned several times here that we have a standing court order for juvenile probation records. We have a standing court order. It's a 3-year order. We have no issues getting records on our juvenile probation cases. About, well over a year ago, it was brought up that, you know, you also need a court order to get adult records too. So we've been working on that, meaning first county counsel, then our outside counsel, Mr. Bennett, Ms. Gross, going back and forth with the Superior Court judge. That order's just about signed, but it's been well over a year. So we don't have that order signed yet, so we cannot get any records from the probation department about any case right now. Because of that, there are going to be 3 cases on November's agenda. We just don't have the information because this court order. And again, I didn't realize how lengthy the process was from the perspective of working it through the courts, but it's rather lengthy apparently. We're hopeful that we'll have some kind of court order signed, and Lynn and Investigator Clue, maybe you'll correct me, but I'm hopeful we'll have it by the time we have a November meeting, so that we'll be able, my understanding is the probation department has the case, they know what cases we're talking about. They have the information ready to give to us. We just need the court order. So that's where we are on that. That's something you folks need to know. And before I get to this other topic, I'll just say that at the August 10th meeting that we had with the probation department, I thought it was a great meeting. And during the course of it, the concept of perhaps having a CLERB member sit in on their policy and procedure committee, that was floated. That idea was floated, and it seemed to be, it was like, oh, that's an interesting concept. But at this time, the probation department has gotten back to us and said it's not feasible. But I do appreciate they're even contemplating and considering allowing that to happen. But at this time, again, it's not feasible, which is fine, because I think I mentioned to you folks back in August and July, our focus is going to be on the probation department's policies and procedures. We have that ability to do that. And so that was something we discussed. And finally, and this is something more that we've been working on. And when I was here 5 years ago, I floated the topic, wasn't well received. So I thought, now that I'm back, there are 2 situations right now. We have a signed complaint. It's a signed complaint, but it's signed by an anonymous person. And the allegations contained within it are pretty egregious. That's number 1. But there's nothing we can do about it because we have no one that's willing to go on the record. And then we also read in the media, there were several media accounts over the last couple of weeks of 4 possible overdoses. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but 4 possible overdoses at the East Mesa detention facility, at the East Mesa, I'm sorry, the juvenile detention facility, East Mesa. But we can't do anything about that because we don't have a signed complaint. Now, one of the things I talked about before, just to be clear for everybody in the audience and online and who watches this recording at a later time, anybody can sign a complaint about anything that they're concerned about. If they see something on the news, they can sign a complaint. They don't have to be there. Now, it would be helpful if you were there because you give us some witness accounting. But again, if we have a signed complaint on the behalf of an aggrieved person, we can look into it. In these 2 cases, we do not. So one of the things we talked about before was if this board anybody on the board would have an appetite, because you folks are appointed, you're the board. But if you were to sign a complaint on something you saw or heard, obviously you'd have to recuse yourself. You couldn't be part. You would not get the reports from us. You wouldn't be able to participate in the conversations. None of the evidence, anything like that. But I'm simply throwing it out there to you that this is something that I'm not asking for the board to make a decision on this tonight. I'm just simply just throwing some knowledge out there that anybody can sign a complaint. And once we get that, then we can move forward and begin investigations. That's, I think, all I have to say about the probation issues, not issues, but concerns and the things we've been working on behind the scenes over the last couple of months. And then finally, February of 2024, we're supposed to move to this building on the second floor. So that's very exciting for us. And I got to tell you, all credit to Norris for her efforts on this, and all credit to the Finance and General Government Group. I cannot emphasize it enough that ever since we've been transitioned from the Public Safety Group to the Finance and General Government Group within the county structure, night and day about the funding, the staffing, the seriousness that we're looked at. It's a big difference. So I appreciate Ebony and Joan and her folks at the Finance and General Government Group. We'll be here in February. Next, there are attachments B1, B2, C1, C2. Those are because of August and September. What I will simply say, instead of going over both, is that in August and September, we brought in, we had 37 total cases, 37. That's like 18 and a half a month, right? That's a lot. But we only closed 10 because we didn't have a meeting in September, which is why you have 14 cases on tonight's agenda. At the end of September, we had 124 cases. I can tell you that right now we have 131 or 132, something along those lines. We have 41 open death cases. Every one of them, with the exception of the one probation death case of the 16-year-old Alan A., which your board has already looked at, but we're waiting for some of the other probation officers to come back from leave or whatnot to move forward with the other allegations. That is listed as an open death case, or it's kind of told as well, but so basically there's like 42. But out of the 41, I want to point out that 15 cases we received records for, and 26 we have not. But to be fair and to be clear, that's not the fault of the Sheriff's Department, if there's fault at all. I mean, they're working, we believe we're getting the cases from the Sheriff's Department when all the materials are provided to us. We do believe that. What we did get the other day, what the holdup is on many of these cases are the medical examiner reports for the backlog that the medical examiner's office is currently trying to work through. So I can tell you that we received 4 medical examiner reports the other day on 4 folks who have died. So the Sheriff's Department is actively working on getting those 4 cases to us so that we can begin those investigations, to take them to completion. So that's where we stand, and that's why you have the number of death cases you have open as we continue to work through. Some of these cases, by the way, just so everyone also understands, they're sealed. Some of the cases are sealed. We've talked about this as a board before, but I can tell you that none of the cases are sealed for the reasons they used to be sealed. The Sheriff's Department implemented a policy, partly based on our recommendation and partly based on the new sheriff, that they're not going to routinely seal in custody deaths. So the cases that are currently sealed, one is an accident, one is a suicide, one is an in custody homicide, and one is another case that was investigated by the police department. The Sheriff's Department is actively trying to get those unsealed so we can get the records so we can move forward. And that is what Lieutenant Perkins and his folks are doing right now, so we can move forward with these investigations. So I think that's really the crux of what I want to talk about attachments B1, B2, and C1, C2. Attachment D are basically the correspondence that I sent to you folks about media articles and whatnot. I didn't send any, believe it or not, when I was in the hospital, but I did send a few before and after. So those are listed as attachment D. So with that, the pending policy recommendations, we'll talk about that under 5E. There are right now 7 policy recommendations outstanding from the Sheriff's Department. I've talked to the Sheriff's Department. They're actively working on getting those. I will tell you, and they're aware of the time delay here. One of those is the eviction documentation and threshold languages. We made that recommendation last October. The double locking of handcuffs and the handcuffing, we made that recommendation in December. The really critical ones that this board and the community are waiting for and have paying really close attention to are obviously the searching and scanning of all persons entering the detention facilities. The department responded to that at the direction of this board. We resubmitted that to the board, and we resubmitted that on January 18th of this year. They have responded, the Sheriff's Department has responded to the grand jury. The grand jury made very similar recommendations, but we do not yet have a response to that. And finally, the publicly released reviews conducted by the Critical Incident Review Board. We'll talk a little bit more about that under SB 519, but that was made in February. And quite frankly, that's where 519 started. That's really what was going on here. So we'll talk more about that. We're waiting for those responses as well. And when it comes to the probation department's policy recommendations, they got all 4 that were outstanding. They got those back to us. And I'd like to just briefly go over what they are and what their responses were, just to refresh everyone's memory. The first one that we made back in April of 22, we made it at the same time we made it to the sheriff's department, the use of technology to monitor the health and safety of incarcerated persons. So the probation department got back to us and said that they have initiated research into this type of technology, but they're still looking for a vendor. They are actively looking for a vendor to address these issues that we're bringing forward, to use the technology to monitor. To refresh the memory, we contend that, you know, your Fitbit right now is telling you what your pulse is and your respirations and all that stuff. Like, there has to be some kind of way that folks maybe can be identified to have, that may be having some issues or health issues or whatever the issue may be, to be notified. So they're currently working on looking at that. We made the recommendation, the same time we made the recommendation to the sheriff's department about white supremacists and extremist groups in law enforcement. And we obviously made a policy recommendation that they prohibit such activities. And the sheriff's department, or I'm sorry, the probation department's response is that the state law already expressly prohibits memberships in the hate groups, as well as any public expressions of hate. They're continuing to evaluate their policies and procedures and recommending updates. This section is currently under review for potential updates. And if they make any specific changes to this, they will let us know through their liaison. And then finally, the last recommendations we made were, it's a state law that as of, I think it was as of last January 31st, that maybe January 1st, December 31st, January 1st, whatever, that every law enforcement agency in the state has to create a policy to prohibit participation in a law enforcement gang pursuant to penal code. There are specific definitions for what a law enforcement gang is. And when we made this recommendation, it must have been actually 2021 and January of 2022, because we made the recommendation November of 2022. I apologize for my misstatement. They did not have that policy. And at this point, their response, they don't specifically have that policy. The sheriff's department did. They verbatim from the law. The probation department said that they in their response say that certain things, being in a criminal gang, organized crime, or whatever, that obviously that's prohibited already in their policy, and that an update to this section is currently under review to include the new verbiage. Quote, participation in a law enforcement gang as defined by Penal Code 13670 is grounds for termination. And that's good that it says that. I do think that the law says that it should say that you are prohibited from participating in law enforcement gangs and also be terminated. So that's their response for that. Yes, Vice Chair Pintar.
So I think that we asked for both Sheriff's Department and probation to look at the law enforcement gang policy at the same time.
We did.
Correct?
Yes.
And Sheriff's Department got back to us several months ago with their policy.
Yes.
And now probation's coming back to us and saying they are still looking at drafting a policy. Why don't they just adopt the Sheriff's Department policy?
I can't answer that.
Can we ask them why they, I mean, what would just, seems like it would
I
be
think we could do
that
that
council has reviewed it, and why
Vice Chair,
wouldn't
I think
just,
we can do that during the query.
okay.
Board member query or probation liaison query or board member comments, right? Yeah. So those are the policy recommendation responses, and I believe that that ends my executive officer report. Anybody?
Yes.
No.
All right, thank you. All right, well, now I'll go to the board chair's report. Again, I welcome back, Paul. Thank you, staff, for your hard work. Appreciate that. Excuse me, just one second. So we could, if there is any public comments, remember, these are comments, not questions. Please. Yosef, yeah, Mr. Miller.
Yusef Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition, Saving Lives in Custody Campaign. And yeah, that was a lot to digest, so I'm gonna try to get right into it. The scanning of the deputies. I mean, we have Deputy Corey Ritchie, who was found breaking into drug boxes in the jails. We also have Alan Warowski, who was found with drugs in his car on the jail property. So when we ask for it to scan all staff, we have reason. At first, the sheriff said there was no reason, there is no evidence that law enforcement is involved in anything related to drugs. And then in January, we have Corey. And then in February, we have Workowski, right on time to show that if we have two, there are probably more. All we ask is for 100% accountability when it comes to drugs entering the jail. Scan every staff and deputy. The CRB reports, as we know, the Cerna family, they lost their loved one in 2019. In 2023, they're just now getting the CRB report. 2023 after 2019. And people who could use those reports, the wife of Omar Moreno Arroyo, Gilbert Gill's family, Lacey's, Rosalie, Bartakowski, Saxon Rodriguez family, and so many others. And because they don't have these CRB reports, the statute of limitation then runs out for when they can litigate against the county. It seems like it's made in a way that it shelters the county from litigation by having the process so long. 2019, loss of life of Lisa Cerna. 2023, getting a CRB report, the facts of a case. Monitors for health, please do. Please do. But the monitors for health will not cover mental health. So we have to make sure we reform and revise the mental health treatment. The San Diego County Sheriff's Department is the largest mental health facility in the county. In the county, we need reform there. We have Gilbert Gill and so many others who could have used reform to survive in custody, death rate. And white supremacy. They say, okay, we have a state and local, policy against that. What we're looking for as a community is a local policy that says that they agree and they support it. Why local policy? In San Diego County. I'm on the San Diego Anti-Hate Crimes Coalition for the county. Anti-Black hate is the highest rate of hate in this county. By race and by religion is anti-Semitism. Yes, we need a local policy to say we do not support this and to amen the state policy. That's what we're asking for. Commitment from the Sheriff's Department that they will not support people in their departments that are affiliated with any of these things. It's simple, all we're asking for.
Mr. Miller, thank you.
Thank you.
We have one online request to speak.
Okay.
My apologies. Sabrina Weddle.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm actually on my way there, but I don't want to hold anybody up. I just want to comment on the deputies being scanned. I have several pictures I wanted to share with you guys. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get the opportunity to share these pictures, but again, on several occasions, have I been outside San Diego County Jail, and the deputies have no process or procedures as to going into the jails. Now, I know we're not scanning the deputies because, you know, they get to get away with quite a bit. But as far as a protocol, there's 3 different entrances that they like to enter. They enter the gate that the buses go. They enter through a side gate that somebody has to open from within side. And then there's another door that they get buzzed in. And there's just no procedure as to how they enter the jail. How are we knowing if these deputies are the ones bringing drugs into the facilities? Like Yusuf stated, we've already had several deputies arrested this year because they had cocaine, they had drugs on them, they were stealing drugs from drop boxes. How do you guys know that these deputies aren't bringing those same drugs that they're stealing into the facility if there's no procedure, protocols for these deputies? I mean, we know that Kelly Martinez doesn't want to scan her employees, but she's mentioned that there's a dog. So is there a dog at all 3 entrances? Because I'm not seeing or hearing anything as far as the deputies. They get to do as they please. They get no type of reprimand I just get a dead brother. It's unacceptable. I keep track on how much Narcan gets deployed within the facilities, and the number never stays the same. It's always increasing. And it just goes to show that the sheriffs can give two fucks about the lives that they're taking care of. We can't even get a protocol. If there's a badge that you need to enter the jail, why aren't these deputies using it? And again, I have plenty of pictures of the deputies walking in all three entrances. The sheriffs needs to scan their employees. The drugs are not just coming in from inmates, because the inmates get searched. They get scanned through a scanner. But again, deputies just get to pick a door. Hey, bro, can you let me in on the side gate? Why aren't their badges being used? Why isn't there a dog at those secured entrances? Thank you. Saxon Rodriguez's older sister. See you guys in a few.
Thank you. We have no additional requests to speak on that item.
Okay, thank you very much. Any board concerns? Any comments? Bonnie?
On this subject, I think that every time that we have an in custody death that has some type of drug related to the death, we need to put that recommendation in front of the sheriff again for every single one of those deaths that is involved with drugs. The recommendation.
Right.
What we're just all talking about.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Vice Chair? GI?
If they don't want to scan everybody, have they considered doing it randomly, like they do at vehicle checkpoints? They pick every third person or every fifth person or every second car. Have they considered that? And the last time I was at the airport, which is recently, I watched the TSA agents go through the very same line I went through to go to work.
Right. And in reference to the randomness or whatnot, I'd have to obviously defer to the sheriff's department. And I want to hold off and wait until we get their response to the resubmittal to see if that's addressed. In reference to the TSA folks and whatnot, the one thing I clearly remember the sheriff's department saying when they initially responded to us was that they were concerned about the increased level of radiation that each of their employees would receive. And so I know that was a concern, and also not having enough scanners and not having the staffing to do so. In reference to the public comment, there was about a dog. We made the recommendation about 1.5 years ago to do exactly that, to use the fentanyl trained dogs to sniff. And we said shall, and the sheriff's department response was that they may. So that's been addressed, and the response is may, and that's where we are right now with that. And in reference to Secretary Kang's comment, what we are doing, and if the board tells me to do what you just suggested, then obviously that's what we'll do. But what we are doing with every so far, and you'll notice it today, and on one of the deaths, is that if someone comes into the facility and dies after, it's on a case-by-case basis. We don't know the amount of time, but if it's a day or 2 or 3 and they die of a drug-related death due to an acute situation, something that happened, well, then somehow the drugs got into the facility. It's not like when that happens, we are sustaining an allegation that the department allowed drugs to get into the facility. That is what we're doing, and that's on tonight's agenda. We really can't do that if someone comes in and then they die maybe 6 hours later, 8 hours later, because we really don't know if it was from before or whatnot. I don't know. We're still working through all that. But to Supervisor Kanks' suggestion, that's something we're already doing. And if the board directs us to do something different, then we can do something different.
This was early on in the executive officer's report, but I just wanted to emphasize it or clarify it, and maybe council can clarify the filing. So we've seen 2 or 3 anonymous complaints filed against probation department. We can't do anything about them because they're not a signed complaint. I know I also have had the question about reading articles in the newspaper. For example, most recently, the supposed or potential overdose situation in probation. But we, as just to clarify, we cannot look at those cases as a case because no one has filed the claim, but anyone can. Someone a member of the public can read this in the newspaper and file a complaint. Is that correct?
Counselor, do you mind if I jump in on this?
No, go ahead.
It's absolutely correct.
Okay.
Hands down. They can certainly do so. If the incident, obviously, well, we'll do our time limits. We'll talk about those later, but absolutely, we've had it happen in the past. Yes.
I would be reluctant to do it as a board member because then that takes me out of the conversation and the deliberation. So, I mean, I'm very curious about what happened, and I guess that is a recent occurrence. So it could be that those families do end up filing a complaint. Is there some way that we can make them aware that that is an option for them?
Well, number one, we don't know who the families are. We don't know anything about the folks.
Right.
Right. And then the anonymous complainant, we don't know who that person is. So the best thing we can do is continue to get the word out about what our responsibilities are,
yeah.
what we do. And then finally, if a board member, and I'm not saying that, I'm just saying if someone on the board would do it, certainly staff is not going to do it. But if someone on the board happened to do it, they would have to recuse themselves from everything. They wouldn't get the copy of the report. They wouldn't get the evidence. We couldn't talk to you about it, and you have to leave the room during closed session. But am I wrong, Counselor?
No, you're not wrong. And the only thing I'd say, members of the board, is if you did receive such a third-party complaint, keep in mind that there is an admonition at the bottom of that complaint form in terms of anybody signing the complaint. So if you don't know, and if you say, I just want to complain or I want to validate this, keep in mind, you're also signing that complaint with that admonition in terms of the truthfulness and the veracity of it. So if you're willing to take that risk.
Yeah,
you
and
can do it.
that would be my concern.
I understand that. But so is it not appropriate for someone who's not directly involved?
I think
They obviously can't attest to the veracity of the situation because they weren't there.
What they
But
can-
they can still ask us to look at it, right?
Can ask you to investigate it.
What they can
Yes.
attest to is what they've either seen or heard that has led them to be concerned to sign the complaint. They can certainly attest to that. That's the bottom line. That is what, and if you look at our reports, we get folks who are aggrieved on the regular basis. The aggrieved folks, these are people who have not signed a complaint on their own behalf. Someone signed it for them, believing that something happened to them.
Right.
And oftentimes it happens for people who are in custody, and they certainly weren't there in custody when it happened. It's their family members who are
Yeah.
being told something or whatnot.
They have a relationship with them. Yeah, I
Sometimes,
would
yes,
just be
yes.
concerned that.
Absolutely, understood, absolutely.
GI?
So the issue is the anonymity. Is that correct?
For the one, yes. We can't move forward with it has to have
All right.
it be a known person.
Are we sure of that? Because San Diego Crime Stoppers, you can report a tip anonymously.
Yeah.
With the federal government.
Yeah.
The federal government has tip lines.
Right.
That you can call up and anonymously report something, and the inspector general or general counsel is obligated to look into it, even though it's anonymous.
One of the things.
No, but
And I think what you said, that you are, when you, the formal complaint, if you sign that, you're saying that you know, or that you're putting yourself on the line that it did happen. If they come back saying that it, and find that it did not happen, after they investigated, that means they can come back against you for causing them to do that. Am I correct?
Counsel, could you explain that
Yeah, I
one more
can.
time? Thank you.
The concern over complaints against peace officers is that they not be filed frivolously or that somebody is not making it up or are lying about it. Correct? So that's a high standard. That's a high standard because you don't have to have 100% proof positive that what you're complaining of is actually true. You certainly cannot falsify or mislead with the filing of the complaint. So if you're not a direct participant, if you don't have direct knowledge of it, there's always going to be a little concern if you sign on to a complaint because of whatever. See what I mean? I mean, so there's always, and people argue that sometimes that the admonition chills speech and makes people reluctant to file complaints, but you just have to at least understand what you're signing.
But if peace officers feel the right, don't they have a right to come back and sue you for accusing them of something that they didn't do if they do an investigation, they find that these people were innocent of that, or it didn't happen.
Okay,
It's not
they
the same thing.
Yeah, they can't sue under POBAR. Oh, so POBAR is a procedural due process guide in terms of how investigations take place. Police officers can sue for any reason. I mean, so it doesn't take just that. But POBAR would not give them the right per se to sue per se. It does give them the right to appeal any disciplinary action they have, and it gives them certain procedural rights when you're doing an investigation. I don't know if I've answered your question.
As long as there is a sustained finding. Correct. Yeah, I think that's something that we need to talk about further at a different time. And council, maybe there's a way that somebody could file a complaint, sign the complaint, but their name could be held. I don't know, but we can talk about this. We can maybe talk about this at a different time. Did you want to say
I
something?
just want to just close the loop on it before we move forward.
Sure.
A couple of things. If you recall, San Diego's for Justice, one of the things that they were presenting was the ability for CLERB to sign anonymous complaints. That's number one. Number two, the contention is what you're talking about. I think it's like Penal Code 196 or something like that, where anybody that makes a complaint on a law enforcement form, not a civilian oversight entity, that they are attesting to, or they acknowledge that if they sign this and they're making it up, they could be criminally charged. And in the civilian oversight world, what that tends to do is the thought is that chills the people wanting to come. It's already enough, which I agree. I mean, nobody should be coming and making and saying stuff that's not true, but the signing under penalty of perjury already is there. And again, council and I will talk about it at a later time. But yeah, we moving forward.
I just want to reiterate my request to have Sheriff Kelly Martinez attend our CLERB meeting and explain why something as simplistic as just allowing the officers to go through a scan, which could alleviate a lot of the concerns, is such a problem. Also, again, the policy on placing transgender inmates in proper places. I think this is my 10th request, and I will continue to request it every single meeting until, as an elected official, she feels comfortable coming here.
Chair, I'll move forward and work with our liaison and make the request.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on. Unless there's any other, did you have something, Jen? Okay. All right, so I'm going to go, now I'm going to do the board chair's report. Already thanked staff, thanked Paul. I'd like to publicly thank Pastor Spriggs. He is no longer on the CLERB board, and we appreciate all his years of service and thank him for that. I do have some comments about SB 519, but I think I'll hold them until we'd go to unfinished business. And with that, we're going to go to new business. And Mr. Parker, do you want to take new business?
I'm ready.
Okay.
All right, so item 7A. The overview of the new CLERB independent study and report for in-custody deaths specific to the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. And please, all of you bear with me. It's just probably going to be a long meeting. I'm just, it's already, we have a lot to talk about. So in reference to this, I want to give the background to our board and to our members of the community. In 2021, before the state audit was released in February of 2022, this board presented the concept of conducting an independent analysis of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. At the time, there was the Union Tribune articles that said one thing, and the Sheriff's Department's response that said another, as far as conflicting data in reference to or circumstances about the deaths in custody. This board made the decision to move forward and conduct an independent assessment. And so with the guidance of County Council and I mean, everybody, we contracted with Analytica Consulting to do this analysis. And as we all know, that in April 2022, Analytica presented a very comprehensive report in which it compared the Sheriff's Department's practices, specifically as it pertained to deaths in custody, with at least 10 other counties in California. As part of that report, again, which was approved, by everybody moving forward, our council at the time, this board at the time, and cooperated with by the Sheriff's Department, Analytic consultant made their report in April 2022. And as part of that, they identified 15 other areas subject to that they would recommend for follow-up. And this board in April 2022 directed me to, number one, find the money, to conduct another analysis, to get a vendor to conduct that analysis, to do those 15 areas. So that's what we did. And it's taken a long time to do. And I want to thank Norris as our analyst right now, our contract person. She worked very, very diligently on this whole procurement process with the Department of Purchasing and Contracting and the Finance and General Government Group. And we have a vendor to do this. And the vendor is the Mountain Whisper Light Incorporated.
What is it?
The Mountain Whisper Light Incorporated.
Once again, I'm sorry.
I'm with you on that. The Mountain Whisper Light Incorporated.
The Mountain Whisper Light Incorporated.
How about we just say MWL?
It's an odd name, but they were in the running for our other
Yeah.
study as well. They're very well known.
So the Mountain Whisper Light was selected as our vendor to conduct this initial independent study of the Sheriff's Department. Now, one of the things that was asked before with Analytica, and now one of the things that's coming up now was, well, how do you have the jurisdiction to do this? Back when we did this with Analytica, there were no concerns on anybody's part. It was, we have the jurisdiction to conduct death investigations, to review deaths that occur in custody, and the ability to review policies and procedures. However, so that's how we were able to get Analytica. Now we have MWL. And so we met with the Sheriff's Department. We had our initial kickoff meeting with the Sheriff's Department. Command staff was there. We were there. And we presented the scope of work that includes those 15 additional items. And quite frankly, I contend that many of these items would assist the department in providing what they've been doing and how they've improved their processes and whatnot. So we had the meeting and we're waiting for the Sheriff's Department to get back to us because we have many questions. The vendor has many questions. To be clear, one of the subject matter experts, the subject matter expert on this program at this vendor, her name is Michelle Deitch. Michelle is nationally known for her work with looking at in-custody deaths at the state and local detention facilities. Very well known. She's the subject matter expert that would be doing this work, one of the people doing this work. So one of the things that came up, we moved forward with the support of everyone for Analytica, and we were doing the same here. We wanted to go with an outside vendor as opposed to using, it was possible that we could maybe use the county's new Office of Evaluation and Performance Analytics, OEPA. But we thought, well, to be fair to the department and to be fair to the community, not use a county entity, let's go for the vendor. So we spent, we needed to get $118,000, and that's what we did, thanks to the Finance and General Government Group, $118,000. And so, but the issue now that has come up is that it's possible that the county looks at this, and I can understand it, that they look at this as an audit and not within our jurisdiction. They look at it as an audit because it's talking about comparisons, but it's talking about just general practices. And this dovetails very nicely into item B, which I wasn't going to bring up this part. So I'll wait till I get to B, but just remember the term audit, because that's what the thought is right now. And I think that that's where we're going to, we haven't officially heard from the Sheriff's Department as to whether or not they're going to, cooperate and move forward with this or not. But regardless, let's just say that the Sheriff's Department says, you know what, with all due respect, thank you, but you really don't have the jurisdiction to do this because you don't have the ability to audit or monitor our function, because we don't. Then we will have to be left with going to Public Record Act requests for certain information. And that's what we'll do. We'll try to figure out a way to get the information so that we can move forward with this vendor. The number one, that no issues were raised prior to recently, and that the money's been spent. And the thought is that this would be a good product that ultimately will have CLERB assist the department to provide its best possible service and prevent even just one death. Even just one death. And so that's where we are with this. That's where we are. So what I'm hopeful is, I know that the Sheriff's Department, Lieutenant Perkins and I have been in consultation regularly. And so once we all know where we're at, as far as the Sheriff's Department's official stance on this, then I'll report back and we'll go from there. I think that's all I have on that topic. Is that correct? Okay. I have to ask Norris because she's in charge of our contract. So I just want to make sure I'm on point.
Okay.
But that's where we are, folks.
Dr. Brown, did you have a comment or question?
I do. I just want to make sure, in order for them, when you're doing these type of reports of research, what have you gotta look at the methodology. And so, and looking at that, that's basically their roadmap for coming up with whatever the data reveals. How would they get the access to like the court, like the medical exam and stuff? How would they really get some of the stuff that we don't already have, medical exam?
Well, they wouldn't get anything that doesn't exist yet, right? I mean, but that they would make sure that we would make sure that they'd be pointing in the right direction, because they're going to be the ones that do the work, the vendor, right? To get this information, to make the request, to get whatever information they need. And again, just to be clear, the only comparison that this study was going to do, there were only two comparisons as opposed to the last study that made comparison upon comparison going to other counties. The only thing that they would have to do to go to other counties in this case would be, if you recall Sheriff Gore's main contention was that the reason that San Diego County jails have a higher death rate than any other county jail in the state at the time, I mean, was because other counties have local booking facilities. He contended that because other counties booked into a local facility, the deaths were occurring there, not at the county jails. So that was going to be one of the items that was going to be looked at. Our data already suggests that that's not true, that many of the deaths don't happen within 0 to 3 days, that they happen outside of that time range. So that's number one. And then the other, there was one other comparison that was going to be done, and I will refer to my notes for that. And that was simply going to be the policies and procedures by which the Sheriff's Department conducts its jail operations, and if they differ in comparison to other agencies in counties with similarly sized population.
Yeah, that's basically, when they come in on it, some report, like, I think.
Okay, I'm gonna.
And the other ones don't do, is that?
That's not true. That's not even remotely true. That's one of the things that was brought up. And I thank you so much for bringing this up, because that's been one of the things that's been brought up. And it is not the case. From 2006 to 2020, out of the 13 counties that Analytica looked at, the deaths occurring from 2006 to 2020, there were 2,100 deaths occurring in custody in these 13 counties. 51% occurred in the hospital. Some counties were anywhere from 60% to 84% of their in-custody deaths occurred at hospitals. So if anybody tells you that the reason that San Diego County deaths are higher than others is because they report hospital deaths, that's not the case. What I will give the Sheriff's Department credit for, and I've said it to Assistant Sheriff Adams Hydar, to Lieutenant Perkins, anybody I've been able to talk to, what they did do on at least one occasion and possibly twice over the last year and a half was report deaths of folks who died after being compassionately released from custody. They do not have to do that. That's a true statement. They don't have to do that. That's not technically an in-custody death per the state. But hospitals, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And some of the questions that you're asking are in the initial report, not report, but the initial how we're going to do things for Mountain Whisper, Mountain.
MWL.
Yes, that. Right. Isn't that correct?
Some of it is. That information I just gave you is not, though.
Okay.
And we called that information because that was being floated as, and that's just not the case. So that's why.
No,
that
I mean
information-
their process on how they get their statistics and their,
Oh,
yes, their
well, how they did
methodology
it.
and all that.
Right, how they did it.
Correct.
But there could be, this vendor may disagree with how they came up with those.
That's
right?
true. They
So,
may do, yeah.
Yeah.
GI.
So the issue is they considered an audit. They're defining it as an audit, right?
It's possible. That's where it seems to be leaning. I don't have an official word on that yet, but for item 7B, I want to address that briefly with you folks, if that's going to be the stance. Okay.
I also want to let everyone know that this is just the beginning of a process. There's still a lot of discussion. There's still a lot of verbal or verbiage that has to be looked at and discussed. And we want to make sure that this is something that's going to be helpful, not only to us, but to the sheriff's department as well and to the citizens of the county. Yes.
Does that mean that they will be coming here to share how they move forward with the study, like once like all the planning is finalized in the process?
Does it mean who will be?
The consultant, the Mountain
Whisper.
What-
Whisper.
What will happen, ma'am, is that at the end of the study, they will come here and present a final report. But as far as the process moving forward and what happens, you're going to hear from me.
Right. And usually they'll present a draft and then we'll review that. You'll review that or some of us will review that before the final.
And we give the sheriff's department the opportunity to review it
Absolutely.
too.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
If I may comment one bit, because one of the first books I read in graduate school is how people, organizations use data, and now it's algorithm to lie. And I just want to bring that to everyone's attention, how we're currently using data and algorithm, like for example, the current system of applying sentences to, I know this excellent expose done on, I think it was Frontline, but it was about how these people created a system to reduce the number of people from across different cultures winding up in prison and spending longer time. And the system took that, the dominant paradigm, the people who control it, and flipped it on its head and started using something that wasn't intended for that. And now as a result of those people create, more people of color, what have you, are spending longer time in jail. And I can get the exact name of that. There's people from MIT and so forth. It was mind-boggling. So now we have a challenge with algorithms. People can create. We have to remember that all this stuff about computers and AI and all that stuff, people are putting this data in there. People, us, we're creating this. That computers are saying. So
Yep.
we have to be mindful of that.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else that you?
Not for 7A.
Okay.
And for you to tell me to go to 7B. All right, my apologies. Just bear with me for a minute. All right, so I'm a little rusty. So 7B. 7B is to approve up, well, wait, do we have any public comment on 7A?
Do we have any public comment on 7A? Any board comment? Okay, we'll go to
All right,
7B.
7B. Approve updated proposed revisions to CLERB's rules and regulations. So initially, when I sent this to you, just so everyone, again, has the background. January 31st of this year, March 28th of this year, and April 11th of this year, staff brought forward to this board 21 different areas to possibly, for your board to consider revising our rules and regulations, but also, of course, the code, the administrative code, because that's how we make things happen. It's not our rules, it's the code. We understand that. And this board, on those 3 dates, at the end of that, we had 16 different areas that you folks said move forward with. Secretary Kank and Mr. Hayes and myself, the last part that we did on that was to kind of corral the time limitation prohibition, right? So we came up with the 5 years and the 3 years and the 1 year for certain complaints. And all of that is clearly documented in attachment H. So I laid all that back out. As a reminder, some of the things this board gave us permission to pursue was, and the main one is the jurisdiction over medical service providers in the jails, whether it's sheriff department jails or probation department as well, to include contractors, by the way. So that was really the main thing, but it was also to codify a lot of current practices that we were doing. And that's really what happened. So I put all that in this letter just to make sure everybody has the history of what you wanted us to do and what you said. We support it, but don't do it right now. There were 6 areas on that. We support it, but don't do this right now. The ones that are important for tonight. Expansion of CLERB's jurisdiction to include deaths of all county probationers. This board said, hold off on that. This board also said, I think you can see the relevancy now with item 7A that we just discussed we wanted to expand our jurisdiction to include audit, monitoring, and performing analysis of the sheriff's and probation department's policies and patterns and practice. To allow the definition of audit and monitoring, and to expand our jurisdiction to allow for us to have access to systems of those departments for the purpose of audit, monitoring, and conducting analysis of patterns and practice. So I'm telling you all those things. The point of this tonight initially was based on the probation presentation we just heard, where there are now adults in these facilities. I was going to bring forward to allow you folks to tell me whether or not you would allow me to move forward when we are meeting and conferring, when we are looking to maybe increase our jurisdiction, to look at expanding our jurisdiction to provide the ability to do inspections of the juvenile detention facilities. I mean, we have the adult detention facilities. It was contemplated for the juvenile detention, but now there are adults in there. It seems to be, would make sense. So that was the one thing. Because it was a probation-related issue, I was going to bring back to you the allowing us to pursue the ability to include, to expand our jurisdiction to include deaths of probationers, not in the custody of any detention facility, but just to happen in the community. To be clear, full disclosure, the probation department chief, the public safety group, deputy chief administrative officer, I mean, not a lot of people support us doing that. And I understand the reasons why. They clearly said, well, wait a minute, Paul, these people are not in custody. I mean, they're in the community. They can be doing whatever they want. I understand that. I do. But as I mentioned in August, when we were here, that can anybody, if the department, now we met with the department in January, and we said, hey, what do you do when someone dies? And they said, well, we get the death certificate and we close the file. What I'm understanding, and now I don't know if anything's changed from January till, or we August, or no, we're not, we're in October. My goodness. January to October, I don't know if there's now anything internal going on to look at the deaths. I would hope that there is, but if there's not, I'm simply saying I'm bringing this forward to you, and I for whatever you folks think, we would, if we had the jurisdiction, we would get the death certificate. The department said that they would give us the death certificate, like they get the death certificate, they would report it to us. We would simply ask to do a review of the file. We'd get the documentation after doing a court order. We'd get the documentation on that specific person and look to see whether or not things had been handled or not. So that's back in front of you for your consideration tonight. But based on 7A, I think you folks might also want to consider, if not tonight, then sometime, to readdress the audit and monitoring aspect. And I will point out to you that when I met with, in March of this year, the person in charge of audits, the chief of audits for the Office of Accounting and Advisory Services, that person actually gave us an opinion that it is within the best, it appears that the CLERB, granting CLERB the authority to perform pattern or practice audit is within recommended best practices for effective civilian oversight. That is the county's person telling you that. And he's also saying that if the authority is granted and the function cannot be performed by current staff, then they recommend creating a new job classification separate and apart from the auditor and controller series. So I'm throwing that back out there to you. That's all I have to say. I turn it over to you, Chair Delaney.
Okay, thank you, Paul. One more thing, if you could tell the public and the board the process. This is not necessarily an easy or a short-term process to change some of this. So if you could explain that, I think it would be very beneficial.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chair. One of the things that we should have worked on this already, but we didn't. And maybe we should have. I don't know if we were supposed to slow anything up because of the Board of Supervisors vacancy. But obviously, I think the last thing, with going through the meet and confer process, we'd work with labor relations with the county to meet with the impacted unions. I had sent an email to Crystal Irving, the president of SEIU. I sent her an email a couple of weeks ago saying we're going to get the ball rolling on this again because there's an election coming up and the Board of Supervisors, this is a critical issue. And the last thing you want to do is go you want to make sure you have a full board, I would think, for something so critical to be contemplated. So I reached out to Ms. Irving and told her I'd be more than willing, as I promised here publicly, to meet with her membership prior to any meet and confer, just to hear their concerns for the medical component, for the medical jurisdiction component. So that's going to go through labor relations. It would then have to, that's going to be a lengthy process where our outside counsel, not Mr. Bennett, but Ms. Gross, will work with me to work through this process. And then it ultimately has to be signed off by the Board of Supervisors. They'd have to approve. We'd have to move forward and make that happen. So we all acknowledge that this is not something, just because you say to go do it, doesn't mean it's done right now. This is a lengthy process that needs to be finalized by the Board of Supervisors, and I imagine it's going to take many, many months to do.
That's correct. Okay, just for clarification now, there's two things we're talking about tonight. We're talking about, we do not need to vote, I don't believe, Council, on 7A. I think that's already a process that you're working on right now, correct?
I'll speak on his behalf. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So basically what we're going to talk about now is what you just requested, whether we are in favor or not of the deaths for probationers that are not in custody. Correct? Do you want guidance on that?
I would like guidance on the deaths of probationers not in custody,
right?
The juvenile detention facility inspections.
Okay.
And I've talked to council beforehand, because of the verbiage listed here as to approve updated proposed revisions, that we can also include the audit component for you folks to tell me yes or no on that as well.
All right, Vice Chair.
I have a question and comment. I very much support inspections of the juvenile detention facilities. I was not here in August, so I apologize if I'm a little bit behind on the request for the probation. Yeah, death's not in custody. You spoke with SEIU regarding expanding our jurisdiction on medical. Have we spoken to probation officer union about, or we're not there yet?
We have not spoken to any union with the probation department yet, because these things were put on hold. I need for you folks to tell me, but I did meet with the chief probation officer, the assistant chief probation officer back in January, not about the detention inspections, but about deaths of probationers. Our liaison in this room is aware of that. We spoke again about it, and I received an email from Chief Nelson 2 or 3 days after I spoke to Supervising Probation Officer Lewin, saying that she did not believe we had the authority currently to do so, which of course we do not. So the executive level and the public safety group Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, they all know that this is something. I met with her actually last December and said our concern about moving forward with deaths of probationers.
So the other thing I would like to know is you said that when you talk to them about it, if there's a death outside of custody of a probationer, they get the death certificate, they close the case. There is no analysis whatsoever. I would like to know more about that. I don't know that that's true. I feel like there are other bodies or agencies that do review those cases.
Maybe, but not the probation department. And from what we heard in January, on January 6th of this year. Now, if that's changed, our gentleman is in the back, maybe he knows, but that's the last I heard, January 6th.
Can we have them report at another meeting about what that process is?
Whatever you like.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'd like to get more information. I'm in favor of the inspection. As far as the deaths of probationers, not in custody, I have some concerns and I have some questions. I do think that getting a death certificate could help us. We could see what's going on and maybe make suggestions, but I think I want to get more information before we go forward with that. So if we could hold off on that for tonight, as long as I have no concerns, but definitely the inspection of the juvenile facilities, especially because there's adults in those facilities.
I want to know if the kids are.
Yeah. So
I have a question,
Yes,
just for clarity for my
of
sake,
course.
and I'm sorry if this is redundant. I just want to make sure I know where we are. So when we did the policy and procedures document before, where we did the medical expansion, right? We took a vote to move that forward. What you're asking for tonight from us is guidance on the other items that we didn't pursue at that time, And specifically, we're talking about probation in two prongs. One, investigation of juvenile facilities, and two, deaths outside of custody. Is that correct?
Mostly. The juvenile detention facility inspections was not brought up to you folks before.
Okay.
That's not something you contemplated at all. The deaths of probationers, yes, you contemplated that. And the other thing I'm asking, as the counselor just reminded me of, is now audits as well based on 7A. Not before. That was not an item that this board was presented with by me.
Right.
And the only reason I never would have thought, I don't know why I didn't think it, but once I heard 2 months ago that adults were in the facilities and speaking with our staff, all of them, it's like, this is something that we want to bring forward to you folks.
Hang on. Mr. Miller, hang on, okay? Thank you. All right. I would like to, well, before we move forward, pardon me? No, I think, council, I need some guidance here. Before
Yes, Chair.
we make a motion, shall we listen to community input?
You should.
Okay.
You should. And I was just asking Mr. Parker for clarification in terms of the inspection of facilities. Is that on the agenda or is that one of the recommendations?
That's one of the recommendations that we're talking about. And the agenda, as you and I discussed, was any of the revisions that we want to bring forward.
Right.
It's on there with the way it's worded. that
It's
we can-
there.
It's
It's
there.
just, it's not
Thank you.
specified.
So
Yeah.
you can go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Yusef Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition, Saving Lives in Custody Campaign. I just want to caution us, when we're looking at the deaths in probation outside of custody, make sure that we keep that separate from in custody deaths. It was used before, before we pull the sheet off the wolf, that it was used to drop the number and make in custody deaths seem less significant. So if we keep these numbers separate, I would appreciate if we keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so council, am I allowed to make a motion as chair?
Yes, you can.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we continue the deaths of probationers out of custody. Bring it back maybe to our next meeting when we have more information. I'm not in a position right now where I want to support it or not support it. I want more information.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to ask a question about, because are we going to discuss juvenile next? Because
Yeah.
I did have a question. on
Yes,
that.
I'm good. Yeah, I was just
Okay,
doing
all
it.
right,
I'm
all right,
I'm separating those.
Okay.
If that's okay with the board.
Fine.
Okay, so we have a
Continue.
first and a second. Okay, roll call.
Chair Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Secretary Bonnie Kink, yes. Dr. Lee Brown,
Yes.
Andrew Hayes,
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Yes.
Gio Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Chair Delaney, if I understand the motion is to push it forward until you get additional information.
Correct.
What information would you like me to bring forward?
I want you to talk with probation
Okay,
and just kind of see where they're at, see if there's a way we can do it that would be within our jurisdiction, or we could gather the information. Go ahead, Gia.
And if there are any other agencies.
Yes, that's what I wanna know.
Right, that's it. I couldn't, yeah, that have that information. Correct. Yeah, thank you. I couldn't,
may I say something in reference to that?
sure.
I understand that other agencies may have the information, but the whole point of the civilian oversight entity is to look at it from a civilian oversight perspective, no matter what information is held by whatever department or agency. I will reach out to the probation department, of course, as we have been communicating. And number two, there's only one other, to the best of my knowledge, probation department oversight entity in the state, and that's in Los Angeles. So I will reach out. I actually have already talked to them, but so I'll reach out to them as well, but I will, of course, get the information from probation department to bring forward.
The other thing too is, my understanding is county council, not our council, and some of the other people at the county have concerns about this, and I think we need to talk a little bit more about that with them. So let's see what we can do in the next 30 days.
And I would like to just add, if possible, just a couple scenarios I'm thinking about in terms of this is, so if we're looking at deaths outside of custody, let's say the probation officer checks in on their client and they die of a heart attack 2 days later, are they investigated?
At this point, what I'm proposing is yes, but let's be honest, if you want to really have that, there are ways that we can compromise on this as well, right? Maybe it makes no sense to look at natural deaths. Maybe it doesn't make any sense, but it surely would seem to make sense to look at accidental deaths that are drug related, or suicide deaths, or undetermined deaths, or homicides.
Yeah.
It would make sense to look at those. But the natural deaths, like what you're saying, that's all natural. What would a probation department be able to do about that anyway? For the most part,
Exactly.
right. And so I'm not saying, this is something that I was hoping to have the conversation about. And then when you go through the meet and confer process or whatever, you just say, you know what? No, natural doesn't seem to make sense, but the others might have a nexus that maybe it could have been caught. And maybe there's a systemic issue or trend that we can just simply opine on to save those lives on those situations moving forward. That's all. That's helpful.
And that makes sense. Yeah. So, okay. Yes, sure.
So when I was working in domestic violence services, I believe the district attorney would look at like cases whenever there was a death, like from a victim or a survivor of domestic violence. It was really to figure out, like, were there any absent services that were needed? What are some of the challenges that the county experienced? What are some of the changes that they can implement to just kind of prevent death. And I think that's how I'm understanding, Paul's recommendation. And I think it's really valuable because a lot of the folks who are on probation are folks that are vulnerable. We're dealing with a housing issue. We're dealing with a drug, addiction issue. So I think it could be really valuable to just kind of share back for other board members to understand, like, in what ways can we support folks who are going through the system and then coming out of the system.
Right. Why they died and maybe some ideas on how that could be prevented. And did you want to come up? You had come to the microphone, okay?
Oh, I'm just observing, but.
That's okay.
Earlier, Chief Matthew Strickland, my name's Jennifer Lynn, and I've watched your meetings online. This is my first in person. He was speaking about the juvenile justice realignment sort of system, and now you're talking about sort of observing if someone overdoses or has a hard time coming out of probation, maybe there can be some sort of link up to say, hey, they were in this program, they overdosed, maybe what could we do better? How could we help them find jobs? I know there's federal government programs help them get jobs at NASCO when they have a felony in their background. Does that make any sense?
Yes. And again, our ultimate goal is to try to offer suggestions that will save lives, that will help people, and that will help the organizations, the departments.
Yes, because I know just from personal experience, a lot of people do have a hard time not going back to gangs, or maybe they go back to drugs because not just housing, they can't support themselves. They get depressed because they can't.
And because they're on paper, they can't make it difficult to get a job. And I don't see them as being out of the system if they're on probation.
And there's a shortage of skilled labor, even in our county. We're, not just biotech, we employ a lot of military contractors.
That's right.
So
thank you.
That would give a lot of people hope, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
And I was a little nervous to jump up and say all that.
No,
I'm
please
sorry.
don't. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Now we have anybody want to jump in on the inspections of juvenile facilities? GI?
I move that we do the inspection of juvenile facilities due to the fact that adults are now all out there, and they also deal with juveniles who are being indicted.
Okay. All right, we have first, any discussion? Anybody, anyone from the public want to make a comment? Okay, board,
I do have a question.
Yes.
So for inspections, are there other state entities that do that, like the Board of State Corrections and then the Juvenile Justice
My
Commission, I
understanding
believe?
is the BSCC does that and.
The grand jury also
The grand
does
jury
it.
And so the intent is for us to then expand to that as well.
Just like we're doing with the adult detention facilities now, starting in January at the Sheriff's Department. Exactly.
Okay.
and the purpose would be?
To identify, to see how their programs are working, to see if there's any policy recommendations that this board could make to improve the conditions that these folks are being treated under or housed in.
Okay, great. GI?
Because I'm concerned about housing adult juveniles, I'm very interested in keeping some oversight.
And have the state entities, could we ask them what they think about it prior to us expanding anything?
I'm sure if you folks tell me to ask perhaps the BSCC or whatnot, I can certainly do that. But if you folks agree to it now, you're simply telling me to move forward with it, and then I can report back to what those state agencies say afterwards, if that's something you'd be interested in.
And I suppose we could say if you got information from the state that would be pretty much duplicating what we were going to do, we could just say, well, let's just see if we can get their information. Would that, is that something that?
If they're public reports, we would look at their reports anyway, just as
Uh-huh.
we're going to do with the Sheriff's Department detention facility inspections. We'll look at the grand jury reports as
Okay.
well.
GI?
And I understand the state is pushing that back down to local level.
That is true. He did say that, yes.
We need to get in on it.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, does anyone, we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Chair Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miriam Pintar,
Yes.
Secretary Bonnie Kank, yes. Dr. Arlie Brown,
Yes.
Andrew Hayes.
No.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Yes.
G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. All right. I think we're ready to go to approve the change for the CLERB. Am I correct on that?
Audit,
or-
audit.
Oh, okay. Refresh our memories.
One of the things that this board did not move forward with, you didn't say you didn't agree with it. You just said hold off, was the ability for us to have the jurisdiction to conduct auditing, monitoring of the Sheriff's Department and Probation Department's policies and procedures and their patterns and practice. Based on the thought that perhaps this independent study is now might be considered an audit. One of the reasons we brought this, I would bring this forward to you now to say whether or not you want to reconsider that at this time or not. One of the reasons to refresh this board's memory that we put this forward in January and March was because there is a law on the books right now that to assist boards of supervisors with managing or looking at what a sheriff's department does, there is a law now that says that they can create an office of inspector general. There is no appetite for this at this time in this county, but one of the things that an OIG would be able to do would be to audit and monitor patterns and practice. And that's one of the things that this board said, let's just hold off. But now based on 7A, just bring back to you to see if it's something you have the appetite to consider now as we move forward with our rules and regulation revision package, moving forward to labor relations and then subsequently to the board.
I move that we do whatever we can to reduce property costs. So that includes that.
I think we need a more specific motion.
So,
Yeah.
so Honorable Chair and members of the board, it looks like what Mr. Parker has indicated, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, would be a vote on item 2 on the recommendations. And because this is such a critical issue, I would suggest that you have exact verbatim language to vote upon
I
or to
agree.
move if you decide to consider it.
I agree.
You want me to throw some language at you?
Yes.
So to reconsider the following proposed revision at this time, it was before at a future time, but to expand CLERB's jurisdiction to include audits, monitoring, and performing analysis of the Sheriff's Department and probation department's policies and patterns and practice. That was the item. That's the verbiage. Now, going along with that are the definitions of audit and monitoring as well, but that's something for down the road. The vote would be to expand CLERB's jurisdiction to include audits, monitoring, and performing analyses of sheriff's department and probation department policies and patterns and practice. You folks can do whatever you need to do with that.
Can we just say so moved?
You'd have to make a motion.
A motion would be in order to adopt
Yeah,
if you choose.
motion to it, yeah. I'm wondering if we. Yeah, hang on, yeah, hold on one second. I'm not sure if I'm personally ready to go there. I would say I want to look into that. I want to get more information. May I, well, we don't have a motion yet, do we? So maybe we can change it to look into that and then come back next month with more information for us. Did Dr. Brown, did you make a no, you didn't. If
add in custom, to do whatever you do.
Okay, that's not, but that's not,
Can you?
that's not specific. No, his motion,
So board, just so we're clear.
right,
So if you are going to go along with what Mr. Parker said,
right.
then the motion would be, and you all, somebody can move, so
Right.
move.
This
The
is the
motion is
verbiage.
expansion of CLERB's jurisdiction to include audits, monitoring, and performing analyses of sheriff's and probation department policies and patterns in practice. So that would be the motion you would move
Right.
if you so choose to do so.
That's the verbiage of the motion.
That's the verb, okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion. You're gonna second it, Bonnie? Okay, okay. Members of the public, comments? Yeah, she,
Sure. I'm sure.
we hear her.
No. All right. So as far as when it comes to policies, practices, and procedures, I feel as though if Deputy Brian Powell, Andrew Randovich, Maxwell Rimple, Andre Ranger, if those deputies knew that their practices, procedures, principles were going to be audited or monitored, maybe my brother wouldn't have died July 20th. If the nurses, Melissa Burns, Reggie Barreto, Carrie Cavello, Ria Encarnacia, Caitlin Hendricks, Marlene Banza, Kelly Payne, Letty Santos, and Chantel Williams, if those nurses were held accountable, I know we're talking about the sheriff. Let's be real. The sheriffs tell the nurses what to do. If they knew that they were going to be held accountable for all the practices and policies that they don't follow, maybe they would follow. We see time and time again, nobody's being held.
Thank you.
And I know.
Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
This is public comment right now. You get too enthusiastic.
There we go. Okay.
If it's not on, it won't matter. It's you.
He turns the mic off, then they can't hear him on Zoom.
Okay, how about now? We good? We good. All right, Yusef Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition Saving Lives in Custody Campaign. And when we started this campaign back in 2020, the reason why we pushed for an audit to the state is because we had nowhere else to turn. If we had somewhere else to turn here, we wouldn't have been in the state audit, then verifying what we've been saying throughout the years, then that state audit becoming a bill, then that bill going up and being rejected, then that bill going up the next year to this year and coming up being passed, and now it's law. That system would not be there if we had what you're talking about here. Inspections and common practices and complaints. We would complain here and you could do an audit yourself. We appreciated the avenues that we took to get that audit done, but if it could have been done locally, it would have been far better, and the whole process would have been more intense and more personal. So I definitely support this idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any, come on up.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'd just like to voice my support for this. I just feel like, my brother, 2 months in the jail when, the procedures, practices, really don't understand a lot of the decisions, what was followed when he was there. He was taken out of the psych unit. He was transferred. We were never notified or why to George Bailey, which didn't have a psych unit, why he was in solitary confinement, how he was treated. I think it's just very important that, and that's the answers I'm looking for, what still don't even understand. What were the procedures? Were they followed? Could he have been alive today? So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Somebody online?
We will go to Paloma Cerna. Ms. Cerna?
Hi, yes, thank you once again, board member, for letting me speak on this topic. I agree that you guys need to move on with the decision of what I'll use the word that the county is scared of, audit. They need to be audited locally because there is a pattern of practice of the department of killing people in the jails. They neglect them, all of them. They've been abused. They've been denied. They need to be audited. They need to be checked on. Someone needs to hold their hand and make sure that they're doing their job. They don't get paid for anything. I understand that people are incarcerated for doing something wrong, but they still are being denied by their basic human rights, denying care. There is a problem with pattern and practice. So I please ask, I beg the community, the board, to please vote yes and proceed with this. Thank you.
Hey, hang on, hold on. We're still in public. We'll come back to the board in just a second, okay? Hang on to that thought. Don't forget it. I know it is. All done? All right. Thank you for public comment. All right, now, Dr. Brown.
On behalf of the hardworking people in law enforcement, that this is not to say they're all that way. We just want to make sure that we support them the right way. I think by doing this, we're going to support them because the majority of them are hardworking and they protect us. They've dedicated their lives protecting us and doing the work that they're out there doing. I want to say that.
Okay.
Make that known. I know I don't have to. I just want to say that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Secretary Bonnie Kink, yes. Dr. Arlie Brown,
Yes.
Andrew Hayes,
No.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Deep breath. All right, so now we'll go to, are we done with the rules and regulations?
Yes, I believe so. We could also, you can also vote to define audit and monitoring, which we've already done before.
Can we
but
bring that back
yes.
next month?
Yes, yes.
Because I
right
think,
now-
and just so that the board and the public knows, these are kind of vague, and we're going to come back and redefine what exactly we mean by this. It's kind of backwards, but we're gonna we do that. This is very, I think everybody agrees with that. So, okay, next month, put that on the agenda if you could.
We'll simply next month just define the audit and monitoring and then
Correct.
also the access to systems. But so we'll
Right, and
we'll put
hopefully-
that back on next month. but
Perfect.
The bottom line is you folks just approved me to move forward with the audit, with item 2, the way it was.
And
so to say.
discussion
Yeah.
about other, yeah, exactly.
So for, if I may, 7C, much easier conversation, I would hope. Approve the change of CLERB November 2023 meeting date from November 14th to November 28th. The reason for that is several of your board members and several of your staff members will be at the NACO conference in Chicago during that time. So, I mean, we could all log in online, I guess, but it's a couple hours ahead and all that stuff. So,
You would need to have an in-person
oh
quorum.
yeah, we would. So disregard everything I just said about that. And the date would be November 28th. That's really the only date that's that this room is available that doesn't conflict with any other meeting. So November 28th, that's your, that's it.
So
Okay.
moved.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a third? Okay. Any other discussion?
Who was the second?
Ariana.
Thank you, Ariana.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Chair Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miriam Pintor,
Yes.
Secretary Bonnie Kank, yes. Dr. Arlie Brown,
Yes.
Andrew Hayes,
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Yes.
G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. The next one is adopt our 2024 CLERB meeting calendar.
And that will be attachment I. These are the dates. Now, some of these dates are not ideal. Normally, we'd like to have our meetings as, the second Tuesday of every month. However, this room that we have these meetings in is the overflow room for the Board of Supervisor meetings. And so we do not schedule meetings when those are occurring. So this is your proposed calendar. It may change. The Board of Supervisors meeting calendar hasn't really been approved yet. But this was drafted with their draft already contemplated.
Let's go over the months just very quickly.
I'm sorry?
Go over the dates very
okay.
quickly.
January 3rd, this is all 2024.
Right.
All of these are Tuesdays as well. January 30th, February 13th, March 26th, April 23rd, May 28th, June 11th, July 9th, August 13th,
Hold on, what was May?
28th,
Oh, okay, sorry.
28th, June 11th, July 9th, August 13th, September 3rd, October 15th, November 12th, and December 17th.
December 17th might be an issue, but other than that, okay.
Yeah.
I can tell you the 9th will be an issue for me in July. It's my birthday, so I will definitely not be here. Out of town.
What, you want to celebrate your birthday with us? Come on.
I concur. I won't be here October 15th. That's my birthday. Sorry.
Happy birthday. Couple days late.
That's okay. Yeah. All right. Does anyone else have any issues with any of the other dates? And again, as Mr. Parker said, they may change slightly dependent on the Board of Supervisors. Okay, do we need a motion for, I don't think we need a, yeah, we do adopt. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Miriam Pintor,
Yes.
Bonnie Kank, yes. Dr. Arlie Brown,
Yes.
Andrew Hayes.
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Yes.
G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
It passes.
All right, thank you. And now we're going on to unfinished business, update CLERB detention facility inspection process and guidelines. Mr. Parker?
Just before we move on, may I, just to confirm, Secretary Kenk, who was the first and second on that last motion?
I don't think we have one.
We didn't have a first or second.
No, we didn't?
No.
No.
Oh, I thought I heard
No.
somebody.
You
Oh,
just called for the roll.
oops.
Hey, how about we do a first and a second?
Yes,
Okay,
please do.
I'll do the first.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a first and a second. Do we need to take the vote again?
No, it's ratified if the
Okay.
council, if the board believes
Who
so.
was the second again?
Mary Ann.
All right, I can't see over there. All right, thank you so much.
No, it was Mary Ann.
Marianne.
Ariana, Mary Ann, they sound the same.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Sorry, Ariana.
It is past 8 o'clock, isn't it? All right. Now we will go to unfinished business. And we're gonna, Mr. Parker, will you update us, please, on the detention facility inspection?
So on, since 1991, we've had the ability to conduct adult detention facility inspections. We never had the staffing, the funding, or the support of the Board of Supervisors or anybody else that we reported to. We do have the support and staffing and funding now. So on August the 7th, we met with, I think 17 folks from the Sheriff's Department command staff, along with some folks from our group, to include Lenore Aldridge, who will be doing these inspections. We agreed that we would participate in working groups with the department, that we would, if they provided training to the grand jury, that we would sit in on that, and that we also made some changes to the proposed manual. So those things are, the working groups are going to still be in process. The current command staff, who had no say or role in this drafting of the handbook, are currently, they're looking at it. They're going to get that back to us soon. We're in the grand jury, there really is no training other than when the grand jury shows up. What we're being told from the department is when they show up, they're given an overview of the facility that they're going to inspect or that they're going to look at. There's no official training given to the grand jury. So there's nothing for us to attend there. So that's where we are at this point. We're looking to get that feedback. And I know from Lieutenant Perkins, we'll get the feedback on our guidelines soon. We're still slated to start. Investigator Aldridge is slated to start these inspections starting January to April. That's what we're going to do. That's the update on that. Any questions?
Have we seen the guidelines, the updated guidelines?
Have you, the board?
Yes.
No, because we have, now the command
We're
staff.
still waiting for them to get back. Got it. Got it. Okay.
Right.
The later it gets, the worse my brain gets.
And we
Okay.
still have 14 cases to discuss.
Yeah.
Yeah. so-
Okay. All right. Final status of Senate Bill 519.
So I think to be clear, Senate Bill 519 started here in San Diego County. Started with the deaths in custody in San Diego County, started with the members, many members in this room being vocal, members of the community, and then also the work that this board did, specifically some of the recommendations it had made. I know that Senator Atkins had been following or had noticed many of the recommendations this board made, and that led to these conversations along with the community members. So initially, it was about transparency of the death records. That hasn't really changed throughout the whole process. There were two components. One was transparency of death records, and one was how to, like, who should manage the detention facilities, what kind of oversight, additional, whatever the case might be. As you remember, transparency was talked about. The first iteration of this was that to establish a Department of Corrections. When we brought this forward to this board for the support of this board, that was the concern that this board verbalized, not the transparency component. And I want to thank this board for giving me the opportunity twice, supporting me twice to go to Sacramento to verbalize support for the thought of the bill, for the transparency component of the bill. The second iteration, the transparency pretty much remained the same, but it was going to be a local detention facility monitor. They backed off from the DOC based on conversations with law enforcement unions and whatnot, backed off from that, went to a local detention facility monitor. That person was going to be out of the BSCC. They were going to be responsible for the oversight of the conditions in detention facilities, and they would have the authority of public oversight, reference in custody deaths, and delivery of mental and medical and mental health care. After additional conversations and collaboration, what was settled upon was the transparency remained the same, but now there's an in-custody death director, a director of in-custody deaths housed within the BSCC. That person will be responsible starting July 1st, 2024, to review the reports that are completed by a local authority, a local jurisdiction, in reference to the deaths occurring in their detention facilities. That person will be, it's like a $15 million budget that will now be with a staff of about 57 people, to include medical and mental health practitioners, investigator support staff, and analysts. That was the final version of the bill, and the governor signed that into law 2 weeks ago. So that's the update on 519. And again, I started here, and because of the work of everybody in this room, there will be, the opportunity. If you look at it, what is the in-custody death director, the way I interpret it, what are they doing? What is that person going to be responsible for? Exactly what we're doing. Exactly what we're doing. It's pretty much this model, with the exception of, if we get the medical jurisdiction, we're going to have the same type of thing. We're going to have practitioners that we're going to consult with on staff somehow, specialists to look at it's very similar to the model that we're trying to build here and that we already have. So I think it's a success for San Diego County. And that's the update on SB 519.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. And now final status on our current policing bills from recent legislative session.
I will go through this rather quickly. Back in April, we talked about several bills that were before that were being proposed. And I just want to close the loop on them. There was one about robotic devices on unmanned aircraft that was going to be prohibited. Well, that died. That didn't work. So that did not pass. Consensual searches. There was a bill, AB 93, that they could only search that a consent provided by someone is not sufficient to allow law enforcement to search. That failed in the assembly. I'm going to hold off on AB 268, and let's go AB 268. That's the one that Mr. Miller had referenced. That's Dr. Weber's bill. That bill was very similar to the one last year that the governor vetoed. This one passed. And what this does, this is pretty incredible if you think about it, because what it does is, and this stemmed from San Diego as well, it actually indicates that statewide, that folks in the jails have to be sufficiently do safety checks of at-risk incarcerated persons, there additional training, random audits of defined housing units for the safety checks and what that looks like. Many hours of mental and behavioral health training annually for folks working in the jails, mental health and healthcare providers. I mean, it goes on and makes it a statewide deal to increase the care of folks in custody. AB 360, this is unprecedented. And my background is death investigations. And for me, I never thought I'd see the day come when any state outlawed the term excited delirium. Excited delirium has been, it's not a medical diagnosis. And you'll hear law enforcement, you'll hear medical examiners since about 1985 use the term excited delirium. And interesting enough, people that have excited delirium, they only die when they're being restrained by law enforcement. That's really what it comes down to. The whole point of this, it had a racial beginning to put the blame on the folks who died. No matter, I'm not saying that the law enforcement officers, I'm not saying that they're responsible for the death, but it would take away the component of the force used, the positional asphyxia that often occurred, the pressure that often occurred. The American Medical Association hasn't said that this is not a good term. There's nothing to it. It's not in the DSM-5. It's not even acknowledged anymore by the National Association of Medical Examiners. California is the first state in the union to prohibit the use of excited delirium, the term, in any law enforcement report, in any cause of death, in any medical examiner report. I can't tell you how big of a deal that is for California to be the leader on that. Police canines, that was a bill that was presented where they can be used under certain circumstances. That failed. Review boards, that failed. The bill AB 797 was going to say by January 15th of 2025, all city and county agencies had to have an oversight board. That failed. That was pulled, actually. That was a Dr. Weber bill, by the way. She pulled it, maybe to be brought back at a later time. Use of force, that it was about the DOJ required to investigate any use of force resulting in the death of a civilian. That failed. Low-level traffic stops, very similar to what we made recommendations on that were not accepted. That was ordered to the inactive file. That failed. Booking photos on social media. That was signed by the governor. And what it says is that the name and pronoun given by the person who's arrested must be acknowledged, must be listed. But that also any booking photo on social media placed there by the department, it has to be removed within 14 days, unless it meets certain criteria of very serious offenses. Confidentiality of records, SB 400, that failed. And so that is your update on what we presented to you folks in April.
Um, I think there's always a lot of great legislation, like proposals coming up to the state. And sometimes it takes multiple times to get reviewed to be passed. I'm wondering if, as a board, if we can review some of the bills a little bit earlier. I was looking at some of the ones that you mentioned, and they were introduced like in the committees, either March or April. I think when we talked about SB, forgetting the name of it, 519, it was like a little bit in the summer when we had a conversation. No,
No,
Was
you
it
folks
spring?
you folks gave me permission to go on April 25th.
April
And-
25th.
And
Okay.
we talked about it earlier than that. We talked about it as soon as we knew about it. It was the next meeting. Once we knew that it existed, then we brought it forward to you folks. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I think we were kept at like continuing to have a conversation. So maybe having earlier time, or if we can support as board members to help you
That's
just
that's
kind of
exactly right.
digest.
That's exactly right. This was brought up every month and it was pretty much, it's like, we need more info. Let's hold off until the next thing.
Yeah,
And so that's what we did. We updated the board just about every month.
yeah. I guess what I'm saying is like if there's a way for the board to support, so we can have more information so that we can move forward with the decision. I think it would be really valuable to, community members, to a lot of the advocates that do show up to every board meeting, so we can, in a way support. I mean, not to say that you didn't, but I think it's really valuable to have like a formal position as a board when it comes to legislation, because it is really telling, when there's like bills that are supported by community members, by departments or agencies or just bodies that are participants in that issue.
Absolutely agree with you. And as far as SB 519, that was brought up every month, even sometimes twice a month at special meetings. But to your point, I like the concept of maybe just having a standing item starting in February or March of whatever we can identify to bring forward to you folks, just so I can update you. And if there's something that you folks, because this board does have the ability, at least by a county council opinion, I haven't spoken to outside counsel, to take a stand and support a bill.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if the board chair allows that, then I'll certainly do that starting in February-ish, March, to keep it,
Yeah.
throw that out to you folks.
Thank you.
I don't want us to get too mired down in the politics and legislation that it takes away from our board mission as well, but we'll consider that, yes.
So 8D, revision of CLERB Board Policies and Procedures, Section 3, entitled Board Meetings, Ceding of Time to Others. This is something we discussed, I believe it was in August. You folks wanted me to come back to specifically outline some of the time constraints and what you folks wanted for ceding of time to others. I don't know if I got it right, so please just allow me to read it, make sure I got it right, and then we'll move forward. This is for the board member policy and procedures. The limit for speakers will be 1 to 3 minutes, depending upon the number of speakers and the number of items that the CLERB is discussing at that meeting. A speaker on an item may cede their time to one other speaker on that item. The designated speaker will be given the time which would have been allocated to the other speaker, to a maximum of 3 minutes. The designated speaker will only be permitted to have time ceded to them by one other person, for a total of 2 persons ceding time to them on a specific item. Individuals wanting to delegate time to another must be present at the meeting and must indicate their desire to cede time to a single individual by noting on a speaker card that they are doing so. Persons who have ceded their time will not be permitted to speak on the item at that meeting. Did I get it right?
I believe so. The only thing, clarification is when you say in attendance, what about those that are on Zoom?
That's in attendance, yes?
Okay, we're all
They're
clear on
attending.
that then? In attendance means not only just in person, but also on Zoom?
I would think so. I think so.
That's how I interpret it. I want to make sure everyone else.
Yeah, but you know, what you're reading is something that exists, so like, and it's almost like a standard procedure when it comes to that.
Right.
Yeah, when I say in attendance, I mean that the person, both people have already checked in as speaking, and we already know about whether or not it's on Zoom or in person at the actual, yeah.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion?
No, I
Council.
wanted to make sure you got a motion.
Okay.
But there is one request
Yes.
for a speaker to be, for content to be read into the record.
Okay.
My name is Deidre McLeod. My pronouns are she, her. We are all well aware CLERB meetings are long and you are volunteering your time. Placing some limits on people speaking before you makes sense. But as you vote, I again urge you to consider whose voices will be limited by this policy and procedure change and whose voices will continue to regularly get an expanded platform before you. Thank you. No other comments, no other public comments.
Well, I would just like to say that regardless of whether somebody has ceded their time to you or not, I listen to everyone, whether it's a minute or 2 minutes or 6 minutes. So, and I think that other board members do the same. So I just want the public and everyone to be aware of that as well. All right, we have a motion.
So
Andrew?
moved. Oh.
Second.
Okay, second. So we have Mary Ann first, Andrew second. Any other discussion? And members of the public, any? Was that your thumb I see behind
Would you
that
like
owl
to
there?
see, would you like to cede any time?
All right. Secretary, can you please roll call vote?
Chair Eileen Delaney.
Yes.
Vice Chair Marion Pintor.
Yes.
Secretary Bonnie Kink, yes. Dr. Arlie Brown.
Yes.
Andrew Hayes.
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub.
Yes.
Ariana Federico Mondragon.
Yes.
G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. All right. Any board member comments? Okay. Sheriff Probation Liaison Query. Do you have anything that you gentlemen that have sat here through all these hours have to say and want to tell us?
Feedback. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Ross Lewin, supervisor with the probation department. Just briefly wanted to respond to the one question, I think, from the vice chair about, why can't we adopt the sheriff's policy? We do have, a lot of our policies mirror each other, but I mean, we are a different agency with different objectives sometimes. We have different associations that we have to work with. We have a policy unit that has been working really hard and actually got this new language, is currently under review, and I don't see why it's not going to be adopted. I'm sure it'll be adopted. And we do work pretty close with our sister agency and the county law enforcement. So, I mean, it's not a really easy answer. Why can't we? I mean, I'm sure we could. We work with Lexipol for our basic policy structure, and it goes through the process and it gets vetted that way.
Sounds like it's coming soon, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's under review from the chief, then it's gone through all the steps, and not to take away from other elements of that policy, standards of conduct for us, which is addresses that kind of conduct, not specifically, but conduct unbecoming and disgraceful conduct, and coming from internal affairs, which is the unit that I'm in, we are looking to see often what fits what, and it's not always a perfect puzzle piece match with when we get a complaint on someone's alleged misconduct, but we fit it where we think it belongs. And of course, we don't want to allege something that's outlandish that doesn't make any sense if an officer didn't allegedly do it, but I think we're pretty good at doing that. Also, I did get an email from DC Strickland and wanted the board to know that there are currently 19 young people 20 or older in YDA.
That was great.
The 51.
Yeah. Well,
Thank
50,
you.
50,
yeah.
yeah, 51, 50 males of those. Because the one female is not at East Mesa, is at our youth transition campus. So 19.
Please give them our thanks for that quick.
Sure. Yeah. I
Yeah,
will for
appreciate
sure.
it. All right, any questions?
Sorry, Lynn, I didn't mean to steal your, your, you asked Lynn to report that, but since I'm up here.
Sheriff's Department, sorry.
Could you share a little bit about the process for reviewing policy?
Well, just in very general terms, we have a fairly new policy unit that is in charge of that. And that deals with the new information coming out from Lexipol, and that's kind of boilerplate stuff and that customizes it for our department. So it would start there, and that has to go through proposed changes or additions need to go through the two associations that we deal with, and that would be the Probation Officers Association and the Supervising Probation Officers Association, up to our command staff, our executive team, and I'm sure County Council has some input at some level, but I don't know what stage of the process that happens, but County Council is advising constantly on policy issues. And finally, the chief puts her stamp of approval on it and it gets published.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't.
When you enact new policy, do you provide training sessions for your officers?
Training sessions in the sense that they're advised it's updated policy. It will be in our learning management system for staff to review and sign off on. If it's something significant, a procedural thing that requires training, there'll be training. For example, if a safety check policy or procedure is updated, there'll be training connected to that. If you know, you heard the Division Chief Strickland talk about the MANT system, which is a new idea of how to use physical intervention. And that's a vast departure of how we're currently trained and what our policy currently says. Something major like that, it's absolutely being trained. If OC were to be removed and there'd be different de-escalation techniques that we'd have to implement, that would be trained. Absolutely. Something that affects operational, you know, us operationally, yeah.
So my concern with this one is if an officer is not aware that this is enacted and they make, let's say, a comment that is clearly racist on Facebook, this is then brought to your attention. Is that a loophole for them to state that I was not aware that this is an enacted policy?
No, it's, I wasn't aware defense, so to speak, isn't usually going to fly, but you mentioned something like posting on Facebook, which becomes a tricky situation for, I think, any agency in terms of, you know, what, I mean, I don't know if we're talking specifically or theoretically or hypothetically, but we've been down that road before where we've wanted to move forward with a potential IA, for example, or to move toward some potential discipline for a post on social media. And we've run into some issues with First Amendment types of things. But if it's something that we can move on, the officer says, I didn't know. Well, they can say that. I mean, I've been in many IA interviews where, you know, our policies are thick, you know, a lot of stuff, and officers will say, well, I don't remember that. Well, it doesn't mean you didn't acknowledge it. It may have been 15 years ago, but it's still, you're still accountable for it. So I don't know that that would be acceptable defense. Yeah, it needs significant policy change. In our institutions, we do have briefings in the field, the supervision. It might look a little different. We have different types of units, but everything is filtered down, released to our staff, learning management system. Now we have a newer one, knowledge management system. So these things are coming at staff in different avenues, supervisor meetings, unit meetings, briefings, executive orders from our chief, in a variety of avenues.
Anyone else? I want to make sure I don't. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Sheriff's Liaison, Lieutenant, Sergeants, you have anything you would like to tell us about?
Good evening, board. I don't have anything specifically, but just to piggyback on what Mr. Lewin said, we have a similar policy. Anytime a new policy is rolled out, we have the learning management system that the county uses, and it requires each department member, not only sworn but non-sworn, to read the new policy update, and then it tracks that they read it. They acknowledge it, and so we do have accountability that way. And like Dr. Brown said, we do discuss any big policies as well in briefings, and if it's really big, like Mr. Lewin said, we do trainings on it as well. So that's all. We don't have anything else. What Mr. Parker said is pretty accurate as far as where we are together, the projects we're working on, but we are here if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I want people to feel that 95, 98%, 99% of work hard. Some gonna mess up, but I don't like that part. So I just want to say that.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, sir.
Vice Chair?
I have a question about contract services. If you are able to answer it now, great. If not, maybe you could come back to us at another month. I asked several, gosh, it's probably been more than a year now, when I first toured all of the detention facilities. There was a discussion then, and I believe I was told that the department had contracted out with a provider, a service provider who could do hazardous waste cleanup. My concern at the time when I toured was that incarcerated persons were being asked to clean up a mess that I saw that, to me, no one should have been cleaning up without protective, the appropriate protective gear. Is there a contract like that exists for in the detention facilities for someone specifically for cleaning up bodily fluids, hazardous waste, that is not relying upon people that don't have the proper equipment?
I don't want to misspeak, so I will definitely
yeah,
research that for you.
I get it. I don't want you to answer if you don't know the answer, but that's one question. My second question related to contract services is, we don't have jurisdiction over administrative staff, but there are contracts that are provided that this is relevant to a couple of cases. There are contract services that are provided, like vermin control. Who's responsible for making sure those contract obligations are fulfilled? So if there's a contract that says you're supposed to come in once a month to inspect, to make sure that, hygiene, et cetera, in the facilities, who makes sure that that's getting done?
I'll hand that off to Sergeant Bracey, because I think he deals with the facilities more on a day-to-day.
Okay.
So our operations deputy, every facility has an operations deputy. They're the one to communicate with those contractors. For the county, for pest control and eradication, we use vector control program. They perform monthly inspections and as needed for treatment. So if something's identified, a problem in the facility, we'll reach out to the operations deputy, will reach out to them, and then they'll come spot check. But for the most part, it's routine visits, and the operations deputy is the one who's responsible.
That's a sworn officer?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
No problem.
Are the camera systems still on the contract? Are they serviced by a vendor still?
That I'm not certain of. That's something we can also reach out to you, LT, unless you have anything on that. I'm not certain right now.
Sorry, is your question, do we have like a vendor that is in charge of all the cameras? I don't believe so. I think they're county property maintained by,
GSA, I thought.
I'm sorry.
I thought it was general
I'll
services.
double check. We have data services within the sheriff's department, and then we have GSA. So, and every facility is different, as far as, some have different levels of, infrastructure, but I'd be more than happy do you just want to know if there is what the company is, or?
I understood the cameras were being maintained by a contract.
Okay.
And then that's not the contract with the rest of the board.
Yeah.
And the intercom. I just wondered who's doing the electrical stuff, because definitely not electric.
Yeah, that's a great, I can follow up with you. We obviously have sheriff's facilities, but we also have, like you all mentioned, DGS, Department of General Services, and kind of depending sometimes what a facility is designated might depend on who services it. So I'd be more than happy to get those specific answers. You got it.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for saying you'll get back to us.
All right. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for attending, and council, could you read us into closed session?
Yes.
Say good night to y'all. Past my bedtime.
Okay, thank you, board. There'll be a recommended closed session to discuss public employee discipline, dismissal, and release pursuant to government code, penal code section 54, government code section 54,957, and penal code sections 832.5 through 832.8.
Great, thank you. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes.
Good night.
Thank you guys.
Mr. Miller, I want to tell you,
Sorry.
I want to tell you, I appreciate how you speak, just eloquent and thorough and meaningful.
Thank you.
What you say, so.